We'll unmute if we're speaking.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so what I was saying was the Judo Bank, AMP Bank have rolled over. Can you hear me, Chris?
No. Marcus, maybe you turn off your so if you stop your video, that can often improve it.
Sorry? To a video, I don't know how to do that, man. This is as good as I get with electronics.
Bottom left-hand corner.
Yeah. I don't know where I'm looking, to be honest.
That's better.
But I can't see Nathan. He's got to go on the picture. Then.
Can I suggest that we could maybe, if you have a question, to put it in the chat? Otherwise, we're not going to be able to hear.
What's that? I don't know what chat is. And, you know, this is a forum we use. It's the only thing I know. I'm not a computer literate person as such.
Right.
So this is as good as I get. Can you hear me now, Chris?
Chris, you're on mute.
I can hear you, Marcus, but your audio is very distorted.
Very distorted, yes.
I'm going to move as close as I can. No, it was before. The Judo Bank and the AMP Bank that rolled over. You hearing me?
I don't understand that, I'm afraid.
You can. Right, so it's gone fuzzy, has it?
The Judo Bank and the AMP Bank, yes, those two investments that have since matured. Yep.
What interest rate in comparison are we getting roughly?
I got that question. I think the rough interest rate from memory is 1.6.
That's good.
Yeah, it's not too bad. I think, and I had to use a couple of non-rated banks as well. They're obviously higher, but it's like there's no risk using non-rated if you stay on the $250,000 threshold, which is government guaranteed. Yeah, so that's a sort of workaround. But it's going down, and the outlook is that it's probably going to go down further to about 1.3 and sit there for a couple of years.
Okay.
That's the latest advice that I got from our investment specialist.
And I have a question for our accountant.
Yeah.
Because our council is buying up property for a better interest rate. So property that's returning a net of around 5%. Should we be looking at doing that?
Well, I don't think Mark really should be commenting on investment strategy.
We're not qualified to give financial advice.
He doesn't really give us.
But the funds of the council are really there to. It doesn't operate like the other councils. It's there for a specific purpose, and the majority of the money should be used, not be invested. I would have thought it's not the function of the council. I would have thought. Chris can comment on that.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's interesting. It's probably better to speak about this a bit more when we discuss the investment policy, which is up for review tonight. And that doesn't say you can't buy property, but the way we've interpreted, or I guess at HRCC, is that we would only purchase property if it was going to be directly used by the county council, such as an expanded depot or a different depot location or something like that. We haven't ever gone down the road of investing in property from a speculative point of view, though I don't think the investment policy actually prohibits that either.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, there's no law against it. If the board decides to do that, then and directs me to look at that, then that's something I'll consider. But to date, that hasn't been how we've decided.
I'll speak to that when we come for that
Yeah,
policy.
sure,
Then.
sure.
Thanks, Chris.
All right then. Are there other discussion associated with this item? So if there's no other discussion, I'll be seeking a mover and a seconder to adopt the recommendation is that we receive and note the investment report. I'm seeking a mover and a seconder. Councillor Kotlash, Councillor Uno, move and second. All of those in favour say aye. Aye. Or we should say raise your hand. Raise your hand so you don't have to unmute. All of those opposed, none being opposed, I declare that carried. Thank you very much. Item GM2, the HRCC fourth quarter financial review. The General Manager.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chair. So the fourth quarter has been completed. At the same time, we've completed the draft, as we always do, the draft annual financial review. The quarter itself closed with a small deficit. That often happens in the fourth quarter as we sort of start working out, finalising our allocations to different funding lines and things like that. The story, I guess, which will flow into the draft annual financial review is that we've even though we've received lower income this financial year, we're still returning a surplus, and that is mostly due to the reduction in our WAP funding. Let me just split this up into properly. So from an income perspective, we have had reductions in the New South Wales Weeds Action Program. We had another significant grant from the New South Wales Environmental Trust on the Save Our Species program to take place at Bilpin. However, that was delayed due to the bushfires. We had to delay that because of the impact on the community. So we didn't actually get that money as income this year, and we've had to roll it over to next year. And then on the expenditure side, I've responded to that, I guess, and also there's been other factors such as COVID-19 that have made it a really uncertain time to employ people. We've also had a number of staff leave, and there was a delayed recruitment. Well, there's always a delayed gap between when a person leaves and a new person starts, so you get a reduced employment expenditure during that period. So those two factors have combined. I mean, it's okay for us in the sense that, you know, overall we're supplying a surplus, but the problem is on the operational side where we're running at really low staff levels. That's the fourth quarter of where we're up to. So if there's any questions, particularly with the Excel spreadsheet, any of the formulas or the methodology of depreciation, anything like that, Mark can do his best to answer those for us tonight.
I have one question, and then I'll throw it open to others. Is the reduction in weed action, is it weed action project, weed action plan?
Weed action program.
Is the reduction in WAP income due to some changing nature of our relationship with weed action programs, or is it just a natural seasonal variation that relates to the conclusion of a project or something?
It's very much got to do with the fact that the weed action program is now managed by the LLS. They're making all the decisions executively, and they basically look at how much HRCC gets. And when you combine everything we get with our 4 councils, we look like we're getting way more than every other council, and it just really stands out. And I've been fighting to protect our WAP funding for years. I mean, when we had it at HRCC, we never increased our own allocation apart from like CPI increases, but at the same time we I guess were somewhat protected from declines as well. Yeah, it doesn't that, and they're definitely not giving us positive messages about securing the level of funding we have into the future either. But at the same time, they have no plan or strategy of what they would do with our money if they didn't give it to us. So I don't really know what their intention is.
All right then, so I'll throw this open to commentary from others. Amanda had her hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just seeking a bit of clarification on what the General Manager has said about the WAP funding. It was my understanding that the WAP funding was, or still is, distributed between the councils in terms of what applications of what they ask for. And then that's done as an independent process. That's just exactly the same as when we administered the WAP. So I'm not really sure what you're getting at to say that LLS is dictating those out, well, dictating that what level of funding we get. Is that a correct assumption?
I understand what you're saying, and in from a optics point of view, they're doing that. They have a something called a WAP steering committee. However, from a just from observing how they've made their decisions, I know that's not happening. That meeting is not democratic, and also they removed us as in HRCC. We formed that WAP steering committee ourselves when we took over the WAP. We've been on it since 2013, and as soon as LLS took over it, they removed us from it. We have no representation on it any further. I've tried to get myself re-elected, but failed. And the decision making is, you know, if it was a fair and democratic process, they would be able to provide me with agendas and minutes of meetings, and they just refuse to do that. I have inside information as well that I can't, you know, put on record, but I know, for example, they have consultants in the WAP steering meetings because that's been revealed directly to me. What governance process would you bring a private consultant into a decision-making forum about public funding? It's just simply not a good process, and not a process that I would say has the integrity that it had when it was under HRCC's governance, where we had it completely set up at arm's length from the board. We had representatives from LLS on it. We had representatives from DPI. We had community representatives. We had HRCC representatives. And at not one point did the board have any political interference over the WAP steering committee. Minutes were kept of all those meetings and made available upon request. You know, it's simple for me. Like you know, I've been very closely involved in this for a long time, and having, I guess, a hands-on engineering of the designing the governance of it in the first place. So, yeah, I guess that is my opinion. I've been, yeah. So I mean, and obviously, you know, they make it look that way, and I can't do more than just say you know, I think there's a problem with the governance of it, and also when it's directly negatively impacting my organisation, obviously that heightens the anxiety, because that WAP funding, we don't use that on contractors. That pays our local workers. That pays our staff. We lose that funding. We lose our workers on the ground. You know, so it's something that's worth, I think, protecting.
Okay, Chris, thank you for that response, which I confess, was directly in response to Councillor Kotlash's question. I am aware that these issues will resurface when we get to item 13 on the business paper, because it also touches on the issues that you've described. So if we could try and confine ourselves to questions relating to the quarterly financial review while we have Mark with us. So is Mark here to speak to this item or this and another
Mostly
item?
to answer questions. You know, I've just felt like, particularly this report at the end of the financial year, I'd introduce you to Mark and, you know, basically Mark is our first kind of line of oversight. He's not employed by HRCC, so he has a sense of, a real independence, and he is essentially checking and functioning not only as an accountant but also as a sort of like an internal auditor that you would have in one of your larger councils. So first point of check that we need, so when we can have confidence that we can get through the audit process as quickly as possible, by having things right from the get-go.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Other commentary, questions for the General Manager or for Mark? Yes, Councillor McEwen.
Thanks, Nathan. Just in relation to item GM2, on the second spreadsheet under the operating expenditure, just other expenses, it has administration expenses. And I just wanted to ask a question around the fourth quarter budget was $8,000, but the actuals were $31,500. Could I just get a little bit of commentary around that, which is, a variance of $23,500?
Yeah. Mark, do you know, could you explain how the administration line, it tends to become a bit of a catch-all, I think. How does that function in terms of the relationship with MYOB?
Yeah, there's lots of accounts that make it up. Which one is it again that you're questioning?
Administration expenses under other expenses in the fourth quarter.
Okay.
Yeah, there's 23,500 variance, and I was just, and then for the year, the variance is actually 55,000. So I was just asking.
Yep, 2 seconds. Our chart of account has about 100 items, and we have a key that tells us what makes them up. Just having a look. Okay. We had high computer requisites for $11,835, and there was $8,750 worth of weed mapping. So I'd imagine that there's some subscriptions there that have lumped in at the end of.
Yeah, that would have been our Chartis, our GIS consultants, Chartis, probably billing us at that point of the year. Yeah, I take Karen, Councillor McEwen's point though, that if the we should be able to better split that item up, and things like the computer requisites are fairly reliable costs, recurring costs. So if I set that up on a separate line, that should make the administration line a bit more reliable, but we'll have the computer costs on a separate line, Would that be possible to work towards next financial year, Mark?
Yes, we can do that.
Would it need to be changed for the purposes of audit, or it probably wouldn't, because what happens with audit is the financial statements, again, they're not on they go through onto a whole different format again, which is much more high level than the information you're getting here.
Yeah.
So it's much less detailed in final financial statements.
Yeah.
No problems.
I'll come to you in
Nathan,
a moment, Councillor. Sorry, Councillor, I'll come to you in a moment. Councillor McEwen, do you want a follow-up question?
I did have a couple of other questions around the grant funding, but I think Chris has basically pretty much explained that in his opening commentary. So I'm happy to leave that at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen. Councillor, you had a question?
Thank you. Thanks, Nathan. Yeah, just following from Councillor McEwen's question. Yeah, I wasn't quite satisfied with the actual response about the administration and expenses, from the point of the view that the budget year to date is 32,000. We've spent 87,000, so we've exceeded the budget by 174%. So is this expenditure that wasn't expected? Is this expenditure that we weren't expecting to actually have in the first place?
Okay, Councillor, the answer to that is no, and it's more I think a problem or an improvement we need to make to the reporting. The expenditure that pushed it above was probably related to our consultancy costs with our IT suppliers, and I think that could justifiably sit outside of administration. To me, I think probably what we need to do is have a good look at what we consider administration expenses. In my mind, that includes a lot of, is basically the office running costs, maybe the utilities, costs associated with directly running the administration of council, pulling them all into admin, and anything that sits with some kind of significant amount probably should be reported as a separate line. And I know I've always struggled to get an accurate, whilst I can normally get a close to budget bottom line result, I've always struggled with the administration line, just because it does tend to have a lot of extra things in it, which I probably would like, taken out. So the reporting's a bit clearer on that. Because I think if you look at the insurance line, that is, the GIS costs, that actually doesn't have any expenses associated to it. So that's probably being picked up, and same with the financial auditing. That can probably be separated out of the administration costs. So those ones that have those big variances in a surplus side are probably sitting actually up there or hiding in administration when they probably should be out in the open on their own lines.
So you're saying that potentially there's a miscategorization of the expense?
Yeah. Well, it's probably no one's fault in particular. It's just something that we're picking up through the review process.
Yeah.
Chris, what's the What's a PMH Insights? What do we get from them? Some sort of license renewal?
Yeah, that's for our strategic reporting that the councillors see via the operational reports in the business papers. It's a system that allows the staff to enter the data at a very low level in the organisation, and for the coordinators to bring that up into a overall reporting goal against an operational outcome. So it's sort of a operational reporting system as opposed to a financial reporting system.
Okay, that was $8,500 in May.
Yeah. Yep. So, and that's sitting in admin too, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So
And there
there's
was quite a
definitely
few
miscalculation or misidentification of things that we can improve.
Right. Okay. Other commentary? Marcus, you have your hand raised. Do you seek to contribute?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
Right. Yeah. Look, when I had my business, I retired last year. We had everything to do with computers broken down into another category. We had insurance broken down from building insurance and workers' comp. So they were structured down so we could get a better picture of the whole thing. So pretty much what Chris is saying, I think we need to look at accounting and auditing should be in its own little slot. And we basically did, I took it off the computer with the creditors' dissections, and the dissections were, broken right down. That's what we as a board need to see when we look at things like this, so we know where it's going. Now, an example of this, which was in the open figures for the Whitewater Stadium some years ago, was the Whitewater Stadium spent $95,000 on advertising with through computer type advertising, and it happened to be exactly or nearly exactly the same amount they lost. So on that we picked up that didn't work. So we stopped that and then we broke even again. So I really think what Chris is saying there is the key, and I'd really say, Chris, break it down as far as you can, so we can actually see everything that's going on. And the insurance, how much of that is just workers' comp, how much is building and motor vehicle insurance and plant, as when the Weedosaurus went down.
Yep.
So we need to know the different categories of insurance, the different categories, such as computer and software. They can be lumped in together, but they'll still need a breakdown of what's software and what's hardware. And the accounting and auditors, well, they can go together as far as I'm concerned. I just think we should do that so that we as a board can see what's really happening, and I'm sure Councillor Uno would agree with that to a point. That's all.
Our profit and loss has 127 items, so we certainly break it down as much as we can, because a lot of it we need to put into that final report. We need it broken down that far. But when we try and group it up a bit to give you a summarised report, but we're happy to break it down however you like. But you really don't want 127 items to look at each quarter.
Yeah, it's just finding that balance, I think, and I think Sam, Councillor Unal and Marcus have indicated some things that we can probably just tweak and refine this a bit better. That should, particularly as Councillor McEwen raised in the first place, seeing a very huge overspend in a budget line called administration expenses is not a good look. And yeah, we definitely can improve that and should in the future.
Right then, other comments or questions, discussion? Councillor Kotlash.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Likewise with the depot and the general expenses line, that's another one that's, excuse me, has a percentage difference of 36%. Their budget was $4,000 for the fourth quarter, and the variance is quite high. Again, general expenses. You know, I don't know Mark, whether you know off the top of your head, or you can easily zoom into what they might be, but it's similar to the administrative.
Yeah.
And personally, I don't actually care if I have to go through 100 or so items. I think if you've got the data and you can just list it, then so be it. You know, it's better than us then having to sort of say, oh well, what happened there, and then Chris, the general manager, having to go, well, that was 6 months ago, but let me remember. You know, so I'm happy to have lots of data.
Okay.
You can
Yeah.
then chunk it down to report in whatever way you need to.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy either way. You can decide that after I go which way you want it, and we can give you the 127 items tonight if you needed it. But yeah.
Oh well, no, maybe not tonight, but just.
But I think what we're getting, the picture we're getting, which is useful for Mark and myself, is that this board as a collection of people are, I guess, keen to see, would prefer to see the detail rather than just have it summarized. So the reports are essentially for them or for this board. So we really should deliver as close, the style of report that they want.
More than happy to do that.
Okay, yeah, but I'll talk to you offline about this, Mark, about how we might do this going forward into next financial year. But as Mark did mention, that data is always available retrospectively through our profit and loss statement, which is generated directly from MYOB, and that can always be supplied as well on, for any particular circumstance.
When I do those reports, those summarized reports, and I send it to Chris, Chris also gets that full list of the 127 items in that profit and loss at the same time. So it's all there over the last 10 years. I can pull that out at any time.
Yeah, and to be honest, I pretty much do most of my financial decision making with that profit and loss. That data, I don't really use this data that much, apart from pushing it up into sort of working out trends and like looking for patterns. But yeah, my sort of monthly financial review process is very much based around that profit and loss statement, which has everything, because that's the only way I can work out if there's like, hang on, why are we like got this huge deficit this month, exactly what it was, and make sure that was a proper allocation to the right line. That's often what I'm sort of double checking, that the funding, for example, with grant funding, we have to be very careful that if we're not lining up, we're not billing grant funding against HRCC expenditure if we've got grant funds for it, because then we're taking on an additional liability, and that sort of stuff needs the cross-checking between myself and Mark. And also we have Linda in the office, who's the real engine room of this, who's putting in all the data and doing a lot of work in actually building and actually directly paying the invoices.
Just quickly on you asked about the depot expenses and why they were so high. There was just over $4,000 worth of legal expenses. I'm not sure why they're in the depot expenses, and there was about over $6,000 worth of purchases through the year at hardwares and places like that. Must have been doing a few repairs in the
hardware. We have accounts at a number of local businesses that the staff access for day-to-day tools and maintenance of their plant and equipment. So that's okay. That's actually that side of it. The legal expenses should probably be sitting on a line on its own again as well. And
I mean, you wouldn't have budgeted for things like legal expenses. I would imagine we'd hardly ever use a legal. I don't even know why you would have used one this year, but
it was a rare situation that required it. I haven't first time I think I've ever spent money on a lawyer since.
Yeah, it's not something we would budget for because we just don't use legal expenses here.
Yeah.
I want to keep things moving along. Are there any other specific questions or comments? Julie, are you waving at us?
I'm trying.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, look, I think it's a prime opportunity to make the changes that people are suggesting. I think that you've got, as you know, Chris, you've got a new group of counsellors, and some of them are quite highly qualified and skilled, just like yourself. But I think that for us, we are held more accountable now with a lot of the changes through the acts and legislation regarding counsellors. So it's important that we have the right information based on your report so that we can, if we're required to provide information, we can do so and accurately. So I think it's timely. I think that once your system's set up, all it will be is just data entering into those particular lines, and it may make it a lot easier than feeling like you're being grilled every time you turn up at a meeting.
Yeah, you're right. It's not going to actually increase our workload much. Most of the grunt work has to be done anyway. So the actual reporting is a relatively small cost on the financial side of things. So I don't see a problem with it.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, taking.
Councillor Kotlash, you have spoken, but I'll accept the question.
Yes, I'm just going to suggest whoever moved the recommendation in the business paper that we might add to that the general manager look into expand. I mean, just to make that our formal resolution. Is that? I don't know who moved it. So.
Well, actually, we haven't gotten as far as moving and seconding, and I'm realising belatedly that this is a gross breach of the protocol we should have been following, in the sense that we shouldn't invite discussion on a matter until somebody was prepared to move and then second some motion, whether it was the recommendation in the business paper or something else, and then that could be subject to further emendation. And I also wanted to commence the evening by asking the General Manager if we are in breach of the current Code of Conduct by me not calling the roll and listing each of the councillors that are in favour or otherwise of a motion. Can we just do it as a majority vote, or do we have to record in the minutes the councillors that are for and against? That has become our practice at Hawkesbury Council, so it's worth me asking.
Yeah, I do. I guess the way motions roll at HRCC, we don't have the complex political issues that your city councils deal with. So most motions, like I'd say 99% of them, are 100% unanimous. On the instance when someone votes against it, they always make that is made clear, and I record it in the minutes as such. So that's the only time I actually record the councillors' names next to a motion, apart from the mover and seconder, is when there's a dissenting vote, and then but still recording whether it's carried or
right then.
Not.
If the General Manager is telling me that the way we've been conducting our votes is within the Code of Conduct, and there's general consensus on that point, we'll continue to proceed. If there aren't any further questions, I am seeking a mover and a seconder either of the recommendation, which is in your annex. It's in the further document. So the recommendation isn't in the main business paper, it's in the late items business paper, and it is effectively to receive and note. If anybody wanted to move a variation on that, now is the time to speak.
I'll move it.
Councillor McEwen is moving, and
I'll second.
And Councillor Cornish has seconded the recommendation in the business paper to receive and note. All of those in favour, raise your hands. I see a plurality of hands. Those opposed? none are opposed, I declare that carried. And I will change my practice for this and subsequent items, which is to say that as I introduce the next item, I'll ask the General Manager to provide a preface, and then I won't invite further discussion until there is a motion before the Chair, which then can be further amended as the discussion ensues. So item GM3, also in your annex, the draft annual financial review. Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the financial review has been completed, and this is as I state in the report, not audited figures. However, historically, the auditing process doesn't move the figures, and certainly not the bottom line, by more than 5 to 10%. So it still gives us a fairly solid understanding of how we went last financial year in early August, rather than having to wait till October. And as I alluded to in the previous fourth quarter report, the strategy this year was to deliver a surplus, and that surplus, check the amount of that, was budgeted to be 28,273. The surplus actually is 92,502. So that's an additional amount of 64,229. Throughout the last 6 months, I have been predicting this and foreshadowing this to the board, that this is likely to happen, and was one of the reasons why I was so confident in recommending a deficit budget in the 2021 financial year. So we're not building up large cash reserves, and we're also basically engaging, and we already have, in recruitment processes and building up our staff numbers again. So that's the reasoning for the larger than normal surplus is definitely related to the employment figures being lower than budgeted. And yeah, it's interesting. I think the impact of COVID-19, just the uncertainty around that, is it kind of contracted our spendings a bit as well. But I was also obviously aware of the declining revenue trend, and that's clearly showing up now in figure 1, that you can see since 2018, our revenue has plateaued and is now declining. So I can't continue to spend at the levels that you saw that I was spending at in, say, 2017, when we had a staff, I think, of around 17 people maybe, whereas now we've only got 13. So there's obviously an adjustment I have to make operationally when I'm not dealing with as much revenue, which I can do, but the opportunity now presents us with the approval of the deficit budget that we can actually start employing people again, which is good. And that's pretty much, I'll just leave it open to questions from there on.
All right then. So I'd like to proceed by seeking a mover of a motion. The recommendation in the business paper is in 4 parts. If somebody was prepared to move and second that, then we can commence discussion and the move to adopt it. Somebody prepared to move and second that?
Happy to move it, Chris and Nathan.
Councillor,
I'll second.
Your move, and Councillor Cornish has seconded that. So now that we have a motion before the chair, I'll open this up to discussion or questions. Who wants to ask something? I'm seeing a blue hand from Councillor Griffiths, but is that what we call a legacy hand in the Zoom trade?
No, it's one that when you're sitting in a hospital room, you've got to keep on moving around the room to get access and I'm running low on battery, so I'm plugging everything in. So I'm remuting.
Oh, all right then. But you had your blue hand raised. So did you want to ask a question?
Where's the blue hand?
The blue hand is in my sidebar here, indicating that you're entreating attention.
Can I say to you, just disregard me.
In other
I think
contexts,
I can do it remotely. Yeah, there you go.
promotion.
Bad
Councillor
circulation.
Cornish, your blue hand is raised. Is that to ask a question?
Yeah, yes, it is. What was my question? Yeah, now with our revenue declining, as Chris has just said, we do have. That's why our council is looking at other revenue streams. The traditional put it in the bank and get interest doesn't work now, and interest rates are tipped to keep going down at the moment. So I don't know the best way to go about it, but whether it might be advantageous for Chris to discuss it with our financial people at our various councils on what they're doing. It may give an insight into a better way of producing an income stream and not declining as quickly.
I'll take that as a comment rather than a question, unless there was some need for a response. Anyone else? Councillor Kotlash.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had my blue hand up. I shall put my blue hand down now. Thank you. Just as a general question, not necessarily specifically about this annual review, but in the third paragraph down in the business paper, there is a reference to delayed grant projects due to the bushfires, etc., etc. The way I've always thought of grant funding is that we get grants for a particular purpose. And I always think of that money as being partitioned and to be spent on a particular thing. I don't see that as additional revenue for HRCC because it's presumably for a very specific purpose. So when we talk about, you know, our revenue decreasing because of anything to do with grant projects, my head starts to spin, and I just wondered whether I was right in thinking about and whether it was a good thing to think about grant funding in that way, like in terms of partitioning it off for a particular purpose. And so that's just, yeah, if I can just get a response, because I'd love to put that one to bed, because every time I read these things, I think, oh, there's that grant funding again.
Yeah, I understand the confusion. Grants confuse everyone, even our auditors, our accountants. Everyone keeps asking me about them, and you're right. You're exactly right. A grant is like a contract. You get a certain amount. You put in an application. I'm going to do this, this, and this, and I need this much money, and then it gets approved. And essentially that application then becomes your contract. You deliver this, this, and this for this amount of money. And if the grant's not approved and we don't get it, then we don't do that work, and we don't get the money. So you're correct in entirely in that. But where it gets a little bit harder, I think, at HRCC is most of our grant funding, I don't utilize contractors. So it goes in, I see it as well as an opportunity to build the capacity of the team, because, you know, a grant project may allow me to bring in someone with a higher or different level of skills, or something like that. So, and also from a accounting perspective, from a pure like Australian like the auditors, they argue too about this as well, mind you, about, and particularly when we were, this was particularly relevant when we had the WAP lead agency and we took a substantial amount of funding and then devolved it. So we were never even, that money essentially was never ours, but it had to come into our accounts and out of our accounts. So yeah, it gets debated, I guess, on a grant by grant basis. And at the moment, most of our grants are all being accounted for in the same way, but the land care grant, for example, is not, because that is, like you say, I consider that as a sort of an additional role beyond the pure local control authority role. And so I'm running that grant line like it's got its own profit and loss statement set up for it. So it's like a little business within our business, so to speak. But when it gets to reporting back on a quarterly and financial level, that stuff, as we've seen, has to be brought up and sort of summarized and grouped. And I think that's where the confusion is. So yeah, I hope it's a tricky concept to explain. I don't know if I've, yeah, so.
I'll just sort of point to something that I guess kicked me off to thinking, oh, there's that 20 million trees. And forgive me, Mark, this is in the item 4, but the spreadsheets that you were helping us out. If Mark wants to comment, I'd be really glad. 20 million trees, that really isn't another expense, because shouldn't that be in another ledger that is that 20 million trees grant? These are the things we spent, this, you know, blah, 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 blah. I don't understand why that's, you know, for instance, the chemicals that we use for those grant funds wouldn't be under chemicals, would they? Or, you know, is that?
Yeah, they would be.
That?
And they would be. And
they would be.
Yeah, 20 mil, yes, they would be. It's just, I guess, the way our chart of accounts is designed. Yeah, I can't, yeah, I'm kind of restricted some ways, because say Trinity William Trees, let's take that as a good example. That was federal government funding. Yet our staff did the work. So I have to report the wages that I'm paying my staff through our expenditure lines in the general expenditure, because the staff doesn't get a pay pack, don't get 2 pay packets. They don't get a portion from HRCC and then a portion from the federal government. They just get paid once, and they're being paid through the local government award instrument. So I have to follow that because that's legislative. And then if I'm doing that at the outside output level, I have to match it at the revenue level. So yeah, like, yeah, you either split things up all the way through, and really to do that in its purest form, you have to have separate accounts, actual bank accounts for every single grant project. And that was an argument we had with the auditors once. They wanted us to do that for the WAP project. And it was just a huge nightmare on the organization, because you're suddenly running 2, 3, 4, or 5 completely separate accounting systems. And the cost of doing that is so much more onerous than just grouping it all together. On the other side of that, though, is exactly what you're experiencing here, which is it just looks confusing because it's all kind of muddled together. So it's, again, one of those compromises, I guess, that we've made to reduce the administrative burden and accounting burden on the organisation and the expense by, I guess, grouping things together. And also by, you know, we can't pay staff, we have to pay staff through one, they get one pay slip from one organisation. Mark, would you like to, I think you're on a mute there.
Yeah,
Mark.
sorry. Does that answer your question?
Councillor Kotlash?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It answers my question, although I think I would rather see it done in that separate way. I mean, I have experience in dealing with grant funding, and I've always kept it separate, but that's just, I don't know, Is it too onerous? I don't know. I guess I'll take that as the general manager saying that it's too much, I suppose, to do.
The bigger projects we're prepared to spend more, and we certainly do. We spend more time to break them down. And if we take on a project, we've done that in the past where you're getting $1 million worth of grant income. We want to make sure that our expenses don't come out to 1.5 million. So we're certainly tracking that. But if it's a $50,000 grant, then we're better off not to. How much time do you spend on tracking every single cent, right down to when you're working on 10 different grants or so? It's just you got to watch the time.
I would certainly observe that in each of our own councils, our municipal councils, is that our income comes from a multiplicity of sources, including for grants. And even when those grants are conferred for a particular purpose, it all goes into council's consolidated revenue, and all of the expenses get met out of that consolidated revenue. And there might be a specific accounting as to whether the grant funding was acquitted correctly, but it goes into the same pot, and I'm not sure why we would treat that differently at HRCC. Are there other questions? Councillor Griffiths.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Chairman. Look, I work for the state government, and in my job, I deal with a lot of assets, and every asset has its own folder, and every piece of income that's attributed goes within that folder. Now, that's for accounting purposes. I would have thought that thinking of a grant would be on the similar basis, that if you get a grant for 50,000, you have for accounting purposes, a folder that says, weed, whatever it might be. And then in that folder, it's then dropped down so that you can drop in whether you've got statements, whether you've got costs, whether you've got accounts. It would go in there, and it should be able to make it much easier from my personal view that everything's under the one heading. I noticed you were, shaking your head, Chris. I think agreeing in some sense, because when we get dividend statements for a share, we need to be able to locate that as a reportable item. Yeah. And I would think that in the same principle, you would have the same thing happening around your grants. And when they ask you for a breakdown, you've got your hands on it. So
absolutely, we do have that. That is how, but that's more done from an operational perspective rather than a board level reporting perspective. We're grouping all the grant revenues together and also when we go to audit as well, they all get grouped together as well. And a lot of this is really not my decision at all. I really have to take the advice of our auditors, our financial auditors. Could they give very strong recommendations on this, on how we should be recording and reporting? So yeah, I can't, if I was to go outside of those parameters, then what's the point of being audited, I suppose. But certainly at an operational level, we have to do that because we have to report on each individual grant back to the original funding authority. They need to see actual cost breakdowns against the outputs we achieved. For example, at the moment, we're doing it for the Weeds Action Program for the last financial year, and we're breaking down we're breaking down all the different operational outcomes and then putting up the expenditure. Now, one of the ways we work out expenditures when we do it that way is to actually have a specific charge out rate for a grant. So we work out at a base accounting level all the different requirements for a grant, and then we work out all the different staffing levels, all the different vehicle administration, chemical requirements, and then we come up with an hourly figure. And then we track the hours we're putting into Weed Action Program targets, and then that immediately generates an accounting cost against that. That's the system we use, and the system that's been approved by the auditors. Other people may do it different. They may have like accounting codes on timesheets. You know, you might spend, well, that's the way it was when I first got here, and it was a mess. Like, the staff were told, okay, you spent 2 hours today on Salvinia. You then spent 3 hours on Blackberry and another hour on Lantana. And you need to record your timesheets to reflect that with separate codes. And the staff, they were just like, it was just so too much information, and the staff were not accurately reporting that. And our whole, your whole accounting system can just grind to a halt when you get that level of dysfunction, and that's what we had. Mark, can you remember that era when we changed? Because Mark has worked for HRCC longer than I have worked for HRCC. Can I just
interrupt for a second? They're the longest responses to just our little simple questions. I'm going to run out of battery before we even get past the third item. Can we kind of like make them short, sharp, and precise little responses so that we can get through it?
So I did request questions prior to the meeting, and these are challenging questions. I'm sorry.
All right then, thank you.
Complicated.
I'm equally seized of a desire to keep this moving along. We have a large business paper tonight. I'm always very grateful for the comprehensiveness of your responses, Chris, but I think it behooves all of us to be succinct in the questions that we're asking too. If there's no further comment, and I'm inviting further comment or question, so we have a motion before the chair, which is the recommendation in the business paper, which is effectively that we receive this report, that the draft financial statements be prepared in accordance with the accounting principles, that they're publicly advertised, and that they're reported to the next council meeting in October. That was moved by Councillor Uno and seconded by Councillor Cornish. No further amendments. All of those in favour, raise your hand. All of those opposed? I declare that carried. Thank you very much. Now, at this juncture, General Manager, if there are no other items in the business paper that relate to our finances, should we be kind and release Mark at this point?
Absolutely. Let him go free. Yes. Thank you very
Mark,
much.
Mark, we thank you for your time. You may now leave us.
Thank you. Anytime you need anything, just get in touch with Chris. Okay, thank you. Good night.
Yeah.
Which means we move on to item GM4, the HRCC Pandemic Response Policy. The recommendation in the business paper is to receive a notice and that we adopt this policy. I'm seeking a mover and a seconder for that recommendation, or a motion of some choosing. Councillor Griffiths has chosen to move, and Councillor McEwen is seconding. Thank you. Strictly speaking, the mover gets the first go at speaking to this, but I'll invite comment from her or anybody.
I waive my right to speak. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, thank you. Any other? Chris, is there anything to say about this, or is it as it appears in the business paper with no further commentary?
Yeah, there's been no changes at all, and we have changed and updated the plan, but that's separate. It sits under the policy, and it's a staff level plan.
All right, then I only have one question, and it's basically just to take the temperature of how the community is responding, and our staff are as representative as any. Is there broad acceptance of the need to wear masks, or is there some anecdotal resistance?
We're bringing in mandatory masks in enclosed spaces such as vehicles from next week onwards. So we'll have a bit more feedback at the next meeting, but we've certainly experienced nothing but positive support from our staff on that in the lead up to doing that. The coordinators got anything they'd like to add to that?
Philip?
Yeah, I'd like to add most community members, especially the elderly variety, in terms of the inspections, they've actually asked for us to turn up with masks or at least extend our distance into 3 metres, which all my staff have abided by. So I'd say, yeah, it's been a positive outlook. We haven't had any individual turn around and say they don't want an inspection or they don't want us on their property because of COVID-19. They just want us to make sure that we're sanitised and we're taking the right precautions.
Right. Well, the board's previously communicated its desire that the health and welfare of our staff and those with whom we interact is our highest priority, and that remains the case. Is there any further commentary or questions? So we have a motion to receive and adopt this policy, moved by Councillor Griffiths, seconded by Councillor McEwen. All of those in favour, raise your hand. All of those opposed, I declare that carried. Thank you very much. GM5, the corporate policy, HRCC purchasing.
Can I just interrupt, Nathan? I was against that last item. Could you record that?
Oh, I do apologise. I should have noted that. Councillor Potlash was opposed to GM4, and I'll make my own note. Opposed. Okay then. Thank you very much.
That'll be reflected in the minutes.
Okay. Purchasing policy. The General Manager, you'd like to provide some preface?
There's really nothing to say. It's no changes since the last meeting, no submissions.
All right then. Okay then. So I'm seeking a mover and a seconder for the recommendation is that we receive and note and adopt this policy. Councillor Kotlash and a seconder. Councillor Yuno. Any commentary or questions? There being no commentary or question, all of those in favour of this motion, raise your hand. All of those opposed? I see none opposed. Thank you very much. I declare that carried. Just make my notes. GM6, asset management policy. Any preface required?
No comments. Same as before. No changes, no submissions.
Happy to move it, Mr. Chair.
Councillor McEwen moving, Councillor Griffiths seconding. Any commentary or questions? There being no commentary or questions, I'll put the motion. All of those in favour, raise your hand. All of those opposed? None appear to be opposed. I'll declare that carried. Thank you very much. GM7, our investment policy. Now, I'm aware that we've covered some of this territory earlier this evening. Nevertheless, the General Manager, do you want to add anything that's new or different to what we've already covered tonight?
Yeah, I haven't made any significant departures from our existing strategy or our existing policy. That was fairly well supported or strongly supported by the board 2 years ago, and it's functioned well. I use it regularly, this policy. Basically, every investment decision I make, I have to make sure it's in line with it. And yeah, in terms of the actual strategy, yeah, and to take Councillor Cornish's issues around property investment, there's nothing prohibiting HRCC from investing in property, but it's also, you have to look at the other element. Like if you look at the policy as a whole, it's the investment strategy is very, very safe. It's like way more conservative even than I think a person managing their own finances would be. And that a lot was to do and all came out of the GFC, like the post-GFC crisis, when a lot of local governments were caught up in that and the hedge funds and all that sort of stuff. So the Office of Local Government mandated a much stronger level of certainty around investments, and they did that through the passing of an actual investment order in 2011. So the policy has to take all that into consideration, and yeah, but I'll leave it at that.
All right then, thank you. Now, before I invite discussion, I just want to seek a mover and a seconder for the recommendation, which is that we receive a note and that we place the policy on exhibition. Councillor McEwen, I see your hand. And a seconder, I'm going to pick on somebody if nobody volunteers. Councillor Kotlash. All right then, there's a motion before the chair. Any discussion or questions?
Mr. Chair, I would just like to make a couple of comments. Just in relation to using Standard & Poor's, and I realise they're a reputable company in terms of their ratings. It's quite timely that this has actually come up, because I know at our council we've just reviewed our investment situation, and we've actually as a council chosen to move away from using Standard & Poor's, and we've adopted Moody's. Now, I'm not saying that we should do that in HRCC's situation, but it was deemed more appropriate given that there had been quite a number of councils, one of which was Penrith, who were involved in a class action with Standard & Poor's to do with the collateralised debt obligations coming out of the GFC. And we just deemed it probably appropriate that we adopt another agency by which we would refer to in terms of the ratings. So I just make that observation. I'm not saying that we should do anything there, but I just make that observation. In terms of the General Manager's comments about, yes, it is a conservative investment policy that we have. I think it is rightly so. The assets are quite liquid, and if we needed to draw on them in a very short period of time, and I think over COVID, that's become evident that a number of organisations who run very lean and mean, like we do, have had to do that. I suppose I'm a bit uncomfortable in moving into a fixed asset which is highly illiquid, especially at this point in time, without having gone through a due diligence process by this council, such as, you know, reviewing our risk ratings, really drilling down into what our risk appetite is, you know, and taking all those decisions and research into consideration. So, you know, for me, this policy is at this point in time, I think, appropriate for HRCC, and which is why I've moved it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen. Councillor Uno, your hand.
Thanks, Nathan. Well, I just had a question, Chris, in relation to page 22, the portfolio allocation. So I've got an understanding. With our current investments, I think obviously they're all with our term deposits at the moment, with our Judo Bank and AMP. What classification would they be like falling under?
Yeah, they would fall under the unrated or the NR. Okay. So I have to be very careful, and our investment advisor has also a copy of this policy on their file. So between and also I'll just take this opportunity to mention Karen's point. When the investment advisor provides me the information, they provide me with also the Moody's rating, not just the Standard & Poor's. And the key there is with the non-rateds is obviously not to have any amount above 250,000 in any single institution, and not to have more than 50% of our whole portfolio in non-rated institutions. So that's often why you'll only see one, or you should only see one, or the maximum of probably 2 investments in those from those sort of institutions.
Okay. And then the other question I had was around triple B rated. Usually when I see triple B rated, that's like a junk stock. So what would we be looking at? So why would we be including triple B in our?
I've never used one. I know I've never used one. They either seem to be rated in the A's,
Yeah.
Or NRs.
Yeah, I mean, like, I would be definitely getting rid of like triple B. Like,
Yeah.
just, if you go back, if you ever get a chance to watch the movie The Big Short, which was all about the CEOs, etc.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
I wouldn't touch like triple B.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I'm happy to remove that from the policy. On that advice alone, I think that's and the fact that it's not utilized anyway, so it's not really going to affect us.
Okay.
Okay. Other questions? Right. Yeah, I also picked up the reference.
I'm here.
Oh, sorry, Marcus, I didn't see your hand. Please contribute.
Just further comment on Councillor McEwen's spoke about Standard and Poor's and Moody's. Perhaps the general manager, because there is 4 councils, could just ask the other councils, the member councils, who their ratings are with. I think that might be the way to go about that situation and see. But I'm sure our council doesn't change anything unless it's really got a good reason. And I've a lot of confidence in our financial department. So I do think that is something that could be looked into. And again, as for investment, I think again, consultation with the member councils on the investment as the member councils are putting money into it. I think if consultation with the general managers on a strategy for investment, I think that might be something that could be next meeting.
I must confess, Marcus, your audio was poor there, so I only caught part of what you said. Chris, did you pick up anything that required a response there? Or?
No, I did take on board what Marcus said. He was sort of requesting that I consult with the member councils around their investment strategy, and also
all right then. I also picked up the reference to The Big Short, which I rewatched recently, so I'm well aware of the public perception of Standard and Poor's and their role in the financial crisis of 2007. Fascinating movie, terrifying movie. You've never seen it. So Councillor McEwen, you've moved the recommendation in the business paper, and you've raised that suggestion that we could use a different ratings agency. What I didn't hear from the general manager is whether that was practical or wise.
Yeah, it is. It is. As I said just earlier, our investment advisor provides me with both ratings.
Fine.
So yeah.
So, Councillor McEwen, would you consider adding a third dot point that we change our ratings agency from Standard and Poor's to another equally reputable or more reputable?
I'm happy to propose that, Mr. Chair. Yes.
All right then. So we'll take that as an amendment to the motion before the chair.
Okay with me too.
Okay.
And Councillor Kotlash as the seconder. Councillor, your hand is raised. Is that agreement?
If it's okay with the mover, could we also move an amendment to remove triple B rated?
Yeah, happy to take that on. Yeah, that's,
right then. So point 3 refers to the removal of Standard and Poor's as our ratings agency. I wouldn't recommend proscribing a substitute. We'll leave it for the general manager to find an equally reputable one, such as Moody's or somebody else. Point 4 seeks to remove triple B rated investments from our investment portfolio.
Or equivalent, Mr. Chair, because another ratings agency, it may not rate BBB, but it would be the BBB equivalent with another ratings
Or
agency.
BBB or equivalent. So we now have a motion before the chair with 4 points. Is everyone, well, I'll put this formally. So those in favour of this motion now with 4 points, please raise your hand. Those opposed? Declare that carried. Thank you very much. And I'm very much in favour of the changes that were proposed. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, that's good.
Page 29 takes us to GM8, the Public Interest Disclosure Policy Review. And this recommendation goes with the enclosure at the rear of your business paper. The General Manager, could you pass this for us?
Yeah, sure. This is a statutory required policy driven by the New South Wales Ombudsman's Office. And essentially it's about protecting whistleblowers and making sure that you run an organisation that has a culture of supporting whistleblowers and protecting them if a staff member wants to report wrongdoing, which is in the public interest. And that's the key point here, is that it's not a policy for grievances. There's a separate process under the award for that. But this is really about the, misspending of money, major misreporting of funds, corruption, embezzlement, things like that are spotted by a staff member. And they want to bring it to the public interest. And there's this policy guides them how to do that and how to be protected under the legislation. So it's important sort of bedrock, I think, to have as part of the overall governance of the organisation.
Thank you, Chris. So I'm seeking a mover and a seconder for either the recommendation, which is that we receive a note and then place this policy on public exhibition. We're not seeking more than that tonight. Councillor Preston is moving, and Councillor is seconding that. Is there any discussion or questions?
Yes.
Is that a yes from somebody?
Yeah, Marcus.
Oh, Marcus, please go ahead.
Yeah, fourth dot point, organisational commitment. And it says, protect the person from any adverse action resulting from the making of a report. Now, at what point does that stop? Because quite often, from what I've seen, there are abuses made of that privilege. Now, if that starts carrying on and ends up in Supreme Court or High Court, and if that person's been malicious even, that statement still covers them, and we may be liable for paying the bill. So I think that needs clarification.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure if there's more clarification in the policy itself on that, but that is a real important point about this process, and essentially protecting the integrity of this process. Obviously, there's the opportunity to use this in an vexatious way, and that's why there's a lot of time and effort gone into the distinguishment between a grievance and a public interest disclosure. And New South Wales Ombudsman Office, that's one of their sort of key roles if it gets to them. And
Chris, can I just cut in and clarify that a bit more of what I mean? If it says we should be saying that if it's a false disclosure or a malicious disclosure, that we have to cut it off then.
Yeah.
Because that's what I'm saying. That's all just to protect us.
There is a process. There is an internal process that we undertake to ascertain that, such as checking the actual amount of tangible evidence. And yeah, there's a role there that we can undertake internally and advise the staff member that this is probably better managed through a grievance process. in which case it stops or it doesn't ever become a public interest disclosure. It only yeah, there's a lot more detail on that on the policy, because that's clearly an issue, but it's also trying to balance the other real issue in the past, which is whistleblowers having their entire careers destroyed and their livelihoods destroyed. And you know, really it's more about, I guess, the culture or developing a culture in your organization that it's like, if anyone ever says anything bad about me, I'm going to make sure.
No, I firmly agree with that. I
So
haven't
it's
been
sort
at
of
the
trying to
receiving end of
balance
that.
out.
But
And it's
all
hard.
I'm saying is, if it gets to a point where it's a misuse, we've got to say, put something in there for that, to say that we we're not like, we will cease supporting at that stage. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I agree. I understand what you're saying, Marcus, and all I can say as a response that I'll check the policy to make sure that is in there. If it isn't in there, if there isn't some precautions around that, then I'll do some more research and actually try and put a clause in the policy that and bring it back to the next meeting with that clause in it. So either way, I'll report to you what the outcome of that is.
Thank you.
Further questions? Councillor Kotlash.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to suggest that we just defer this till the next meeting, because I got a bit confused about how this connects with our complaints coordinator. So I dug back to the business paper of the 12th of December 2019, and just to refresh your memories, we had a discussion about having our complaints coordinator in one of our constituent councils, and we had a big debate about how that, because HRC is such a small organisation, that that brought that role out, and I think we all agreed that that was good. In the business paper, it says further, section 3.20 of the procedures says that the person appointed as complaints coordinator or alternative complaints coordinator must be a nominated disclosures coordinator appointed for the purpose of receiving and managing reports of wrongdoing under the Public Interest Disclosures Act of 1994. So I thought to myself, okay, so should we defer this and get our general manager to just check to see whether we need to do that flow diagram a bit differently and have our disclosure coordinator in the same constituent council or somehow else, because I don't think that it's going to.
So before the general manager answers, I'll just provide some additional context for councillors. So when this came up late last year, and there was a general consensus that it was a good idea to ask one of the member councils to act as an external complaints coordinator, I approached the general manager of Hawkesbury City Council, and there is now a designated staff member within Hawkesbury City Council to be a complaints coordinator for HRCC. And I believe that that process has been formalised in the sense that that person is now there in that role. I asked him recently if he had received any complaints in that role, and his answer was no. So it's there.
That's good. That's not the point, though.
I know, but I share your confusion, Councillor Kotlash, as to the nexus between that mechanism and what you've now described about what it says about the public interest disclosure process and what's before us tonight. So, Chris, is there any clarity you can bring to us on that regard?
Yeah, that crossed my mind as well. I'd prefer not to go down that route again, just because the complicated nature of having to deal with another bureaucracy, like it took us quite a long while to resolve that operationally, like months and months. And I guess that's what we're looking at. I'd be looking at again.
But the problem is that if we don't do that, then we'll have to go back and get our complaints coordinator to be back, because it clearly says that they have to be the same. That's what it says. I mean, I don't know whether if there's any. I mean, I must have remembered.
I've designated staff members as the public interest disclosure coordinators,
Yes, but it says here the person appointed as the complaints coordinator or alternate must be nominated. So we're going to have to renege on that relationship that's taken us months to establish.
I'm not sure that that's the case, councillor.
I'm getting exactly what Amanda's saying. I think Amanda's saying there's actually a link between the two.
Yeah, that's what it says. I didn't make that up. That's not my opinion. It's just
I think
in the business paper.
Yeah, but
I don't know how I remembered it, but I thought I've heard this before, and I dug it out.
They're separate things. There's two types of complaints. There's a complaints coordinator for conduct, and there's a complaints coordinator for public interest disclosures.
Yeah.
And they can be separate people.
But it says here under the procedures that the person appointed as complaints coordinator must be a nominated disclosures coordinator appointed under that EID Act. That's what it says. So that's why I was thinking if we just defer this till the next meeting, I mean, I don't think there'll be any problem. It's still, we have a current policy, so it's not, we're not leaving ourselves, we're not leaving ourselves out on a limb here. I think we just need to clear that up, because if we, I mean, anyway, I vote we just defer and clear it up. I don't think it'll take much effort. Hopefully.
Is it possible, councillor, that wording refers to the person acting in that role being of that category rather than being of that exact role, in the sense that as a teacher, I'm a mandatory reporter. So if I see something bad happening to children, I have to report that. But that's not to say that I'm the mandatory reporter for a particular school. It's a category rather than a role. Is that possibly what's happening here?
I don't know, Mr. Chair. I'm just reading out what it said in our business paper of December 2019. That's what it says, and it made me, I don't know what tweaked my memory, but it did. And then I thought, well, we can't have a disclosures coordinator, a disclosures, we might be able to have a disclosures officer without them being what we've just farmed off to a constituent council. We just need to get that, and I don't know whether we can sort that out here, but I don't see how we can actually, I don't see how we can vote on this if we're not sure on how that operates.
I take your point, councillor. I'm looking at the same document on my screen now. In all sincerity, I'm passing this differently. I see it as a person with a particular qualification rather than a person that's been designated to a specific role for our organisation. It's like saying you will have your accounts done by a qualified CPA. So, but
are you reading page 12 of the 12th of December 2019?
I am, councillor, but for the benefit of other councillors who haven't been able to bring it up on their own screens as quickly, if you feel that some delay will permit this to be further clarified, Chris, is there any consequence to us delaying this until October?
Well, this isn't an adoption of the policy. It's only the review for it to go out on public exhibition.
That's right.
So I can make the changes, but I see that the two policies, the code of conduct and this, as completely separate, and the designations of the people.
So that point is well taken. We are only seeking to place this on public exhibition. if the mover was Councillor Preston, can I ask Councillor Preston, are you still happy to proceed with the public exhibition of this, subject to this further question being resolved in time for the October meeting?
And if we need to change anything, we can do it after it comes back from exhibition anyway, can't we, as such? Unless it's a
Yes.
massive change.
It's only, this would be minor.
Why delay? Let's get it out there, and then if we need to, in the meantime, investigate and look at things, we can do that.
All right then. Further questions? Commentary? Councillor Griffiths.
Yeah, look, thanks, Mr. Chairman. The only thing I'm going to raise is on page 13 of 23. The only concern I have is that we've put people's names in under titles. Now, it just means that every 12 months you would have to go and change it, Nathan. If we, roll over our chairman every 12 months, it's got to be updated every 12 months. So is that what you plan on doing, Chris?
That's what I have to do. That's what we do.
Okay.
And that's the way it's meant to be. There's just no way around it. To be honest, I probably don't remember to do it. When I picked this up last, I think it had Karen, no, it had Brad's, Brad was the chair. Yeah, I was a bit late in getting to it. But it shouldn't really matter, because, I mean, if someone wants to get in touch with the chair, it's easy to find those details of who the chair is. It's all on our website. Yeah.
All right then, and I'm inclined to agree that there's a gulf of difference between changing the policy that requires its formal re-exhibition and adoption, and then just changing an administrative detail such as who the contact person is. So I note your point, Councillor Griffiths, but it's not a deal breaker for me.
No, it's not a deal breaker for me either, but if there was a simpler way where you didn't have to go and modify it every 12 months, I was looking for it.
Can I just,
Councillor Kotlash.
sorry, can I add one little bit more?
Mm.
This is not done on the latest model policy. Yeah, a few of the addresses have changed. So if the general manager just wants to get the July 2021, it's got the new address of the ICAC and the new address of the HIPAA stuff. And it's really just, it's really all quite similar, except their flow chart is a bit different, but I don't think that I think that can be done after exhibition. Anyway, just for the sake of completeness. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Yuno.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, just following on from naming the actual individual stakeholders on page 13, wouldn't it be better just to reference the policy back to our website, so we're only maintaining those details in like one spot?
Yes, that's true. That's a good point. I'll do that.
Yeah, I think that's a sensible and fairly trivial change. So, do we need to include that as a dot point in the?
No, because it's a change to within the policy itself.
All right then. The recommendations are listed 3 and 4, but there's only 2 recommendations, so I'll just assume that it's an error in the numbering sequence. If there's no further comment, the motion before us is to receive note and to place this policy on public exhibition. I'm sure the General Manager's taken on that feedback to make some small trivial changes. Moved by Councillor Preston, seconded by Councillor Uno. All of those in favour, raise your hand. All of those opposed, I'll declare that carried with no dissent. Oh, well, I presume Marcus is in favour. GM.
I'm in favour. You'd hear it if I wasn't.
Thank you, Marcus. GM 9, fees payable to chairman and members. It is what says it is. I'll seek a mover and a seconder for that. Councillor McEwen, seconded.
Yep.
Councillor Cornish, any discussion required? Councillor Uno.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on this, and I know that it's been the process or the policy for some time to always award the maximum fee. So I'm just wondering, would it be prudent for us to conduct a review with other county councils to see if we are basically within market of the actual payment? And so I would recommend adding a point 4 that we conduct a review to look at the actual rates that we are paying for like governance. Just because I've looked at the some of the stats, the cost of governance for the HRCC is roughly 3.7% of the total revenue, and that's quite substantially higher than any other of the councils that we actually belong to. So I'm just not sure if we're actually within market.
Right then, well, I mean, I'll let the general manager speak to that.
Yeah, I haven't done that sort of investigation in the past, so I'm not aware. I do know that every county council is different, so I'm more than happy to do that. I have contact with every other county council in the state, and I have no problem getting that information for you.
If I could ask a question, I mean, is it possible that a simple explanation is that other county councils have different numbers of constituent members or send different numbers of delegates to their boards?
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, look, it's just, I kind of adopted it is what it is type of approach, and have just perpetuated that, and you know, and wouldn't really change that unless I was advised otherwise.
Okay, Councillor McEwen, I saw your hand raised.
Thanks, Nathan. It's really, really hard to do benchmarking for the county council, given the nature of the beast that we are. So I think it's going to be extremely difficult. I suppose I've always taken some comfort out of the fact that it's IPART that set the minimums and the maximums. I get where you're coming from in terms of, you know, where do we sit within that continuum? But the fact that I think we adopted way back in the day, a long time before my time, to pay at the maximum level, I think that was maybe a conscious decision that we made. I know that we do a very similar thing at our council, and I think it depends on the size of your council as well, in terms of where you sort of sit, the rating, the category. So it makes it a bit difficult for us, because I don't know that the HR or any of the county councils are actually categorised as such, to take into consideration, you know, the population that we actually cover. And I think if you did it via population, I think we'd probably be right up there. Maybe not in geographical spread, because some of those rural county councils, I think, have a lot more ground to cover. But we certainly have, I think, I believe, a far denser population. But, you know, I'm happy to go with it. And as I said, the comfort that I get is the fact that it's set by IPART, it is independently overseen, and that's where I was sort of coming from. And I'm more than happy to keep it where it is for this 12 months. I think that's totally appropriate in the climate that we're in.
All right then, other commentary?
Yep.
Councillor Cornish.
Yeah, just on that, Councillor, you know, I think it's very hard, again, as Karen said, to peg it, because, you know, Penrith is a $300 million a year council, and you guys are far higher than us. And then you've got our poorer neighbours there at Hawkesbury, and Blacktown's very high again. So when
Bigger than
you look
you.
at it, it's more. Yeah, you're bigger than us. All right, but it's more a minimum wage situation than as a percentage is the way I view it. You know, I think we'd probably be better off getting our handouts with what JobSaver or something at the moment. But yeah, I don't think you can peg it. And the other county councils, from what I gather, are smaller. And several years ago, we actually, Chris did speak to us about what other county councils were doing. And it didn't look like anything like we're doing. They were, didn't come up to our standard.
Right, thank you. No other commentary? The only other thing, oh, Councillor Griffiths.
Yeah, look, Nathan, Mr. Chairman, I'd say that Chris has been around long enough, even when Councillor Kelly was there, and would have a pretty good knowledge and understanding of past history regarding the county councils, as do I, being a manager in the union that looked after county councils. So there's history there in regards to its size, its operation. It's covered under Local Government State Award and the Act. And as Karen said, it's pretty well regulated. And I'm with Karen and Nathan that I think, you know, at the moment we hold it where it is in the current climate and then review it again next year.
Indeed. Okay. Other commentary? The only other thing I'll add is that I don't know what your experience has been, but Hawkesbury Council, when we were confronting this question, found ourselves that we are now in a completely new category of council.
But
it hasn't changed the stipend for councillors at all. So we're under a new label, but it means we get paid exactly the same amount. So all right then, I'll put the motion moved by Councillor McEwen and seconded by Councillor Cornish that we receive and note and set the payments as indicated. All of those in favour, raise your hands. All of those opposed, I'll declare that carried. Thank you very much. DM10, the Local Government New South Wales Annual Conference, which is going to be held in the Hunter Valley.
Yeah, I think they're taking still a bit of a risk doing it in person. But let's hope it goes ahead. Yeah, so basically this is just notice there of the two deadlines, 28th of September for motions and 3rd of October for delegates. So it'd probably be good definitely to have any motions decided tonight, and it'd be handy to have the delegates worked out as well if we could.
Chris, I've put my hand up as potentially a delegate on behalf of my council. And I agree. I'm sceptical that this will happen. I'm sceptical that this will happen at all. But assuming that it does, my suggestion is, are any of the issues that's come before us and that are in an item later in our business paper relating to WAP audit and our seat at various tables, are these things that can be advocated through a local government conference or not really?
Yes. I think they can. We've received excellent support from Local Government New South Wales on our advocacy about this. I have to say they're 100% supportive, and they've written letters on our behalf and spoken to people and done what they can.
So in short, what I'm suggesting is that if that would be a suitable motion for us to put on our behalf, then I think we'd be open to considering some wording that you'd like to advance. Councillor McEwen, I apologise, I didn't want to gazump you. Did you want to say something?
I just declare I'm on the board of Local Government New South Wales, and can I just say that the conference is a movable feast. So I think it's, you know, it's a wait and watch at the moment. And yeah, so I wouldn't be getting too excited about attending the Hunter Valley if I were you at this point in time. And the logistics of actually the president conducting a virtual conference would be a logistical nightmare with 128 on, well, there's, you know, 124 member councils and all the associate member councils, it's, I think, virtually impossible.
It's hard enough when we're there in person.
I know.
So I wouldn't be getting too worked up over it at this point. Certainly develop motions to go forward. I think that's totally appropriate, but yeah, I wouldn't be booking any accommodation at this point in time that you can't get refunded.
I'm just mindful of the fact that, you know, if we did want to advance a motion, the deadline for these motions falls before our next meeting. So, Chris, I think what we should do is proceed on the basis that it might happen, work up a form of wording, circulate it by email, and we'll get a consensus by email, I suspect, before our next.
So Nathan, I'm also on the board as well, as same as Karen. So we're both on the Local Government New South Wales board. So I think that what our council does is that anything that's gone through as a motion of our committee or of our council is actually looked at, and then the general manager gives us a script in respect to what the proposed motion would be. That may have already been sent off during the year, Chris. Yeah. Then you pick the ones that you think that will get the most traction out, and they're the ones that we put on the floor. Yeah,
I totally agree with that process. Yeah, and that's what I was intending to do. And certainly with item GM13 coming up, I'll be further guided by that as well. To see whether that's something you want to do, but. You really want a motion at this conference to sort of follow a bit of a trend with your own, inside your own organisation. So it's not just a thought bubble that just flies out for the purpose of the conference. That there's actually a history of it being discussed by the board.
All right then. So with suitable scepticism as to whether this will happen. I'm seeking a mover and a seconder for the recommendation that we prepare motions, that we nominate some delegates, which we'll do if this passes, and that you let Local Government New South Wales know. Who wants to move that? Councillor Griffiths is moving.
The faceless man.
And Councillor Cornish is prepared to second. Any further discussion? Councillor Uno?
Just a quick question. So if it does go ahead, and if we're then chosen as delegates of our councils, can we also be delegates of the HRCC, or does that get cancelled out?
Yes, that's in the rules and the standing orders that you get 2 votes.
Okay.
So you look extra cool. You've got like double around you, like bling. Yeah.
No, you don't anymore. They can load them up on the one device, Chris.
Oh, no.
It just registers.
Multiple personalities.
Yeah, no.
Okay, then. All of those in favour, raise your hands. All of those opposed? I'll declare that carried.
We now it's not very often we get a chance to vote twice on one item.
Well, as they say, vote early and vote often. So we are now at the stage where we would seek to nominate delegates if this theoretical conference should occur. I'm already going, so I'm happy to be one. Is there anybody else? So Julie, anybody else wants to? Karen, and is everyone happy for me to be the third?
Yep.
All right then. So there's our 3. Did anybody else felt that they've missed out? All right then. So it's Julie, Karen, and myself. Any objection? Done. Okay. Thank you. And stay tuned about whether it actually happens. GM 11, pecuniary interest returns. Do we have to fill out? Are we? You haven't
really to talk about here, except I just put this as a report to give everyone advance notice that that time of the year is upon us, and you'll get.
So my council have just given us our paperwork, but we're doing it online this time. So
ours won't be online. Ours will be. You'll be given I will give you a letter. I'll give you a hard copy of the form and a copy of last year's of your actual what you did last year. And then you need to complete it for this year, and you can scan it and email it back to me or post it back to me. So yeah, we're
all right then. So this is basically just a heads up that that's incoming. I nominate Councillor Preston and Councillor Kotlash to move and that we receive and note that. All of those in favour say aye. All of those.
Hang on.
Oh, Councillor Cornish, I apologise if you wished to make a contribution.
Yeah, in our council, we have other forms as well that we've got to do. And one's something to do with relationships with management form. Karen, Councillor McEwen probably be able to say the name. I'll call it a nepotism register. But you're basically declaring if you have any dealings with anyone in the council through work-wise.
It's called the Related Parties Declaration. So if anyone in your family or, does business with council in some way, because we all live in small communities, then that has to be declared and you have to declare the dollar value.
Can
I just ask a question?
I haven't finished that one.
Yeah, can I just ask a question with that form? Is that like the ABC report, Karen, where they're talking about relationships with different people, like who you're going out with?
No.
Okay.
No, this is basically who you deal with, and if you have family working in the council and things like that. So it's to do with money. But after discussions with governance and with some of our other entities that Penrith Council has, we're looking at moving it through all our entities and related parties, such as the Whitewater Stadium, etc. And as we found that certain other ones had terrible governance on them, but they're not like that. We're doing quite well here, but it's just another thing that I believe is important. Just for transparency, it's only, and 99% of them are going to be nil. So, but it is something I just wanted to flag now because it may come up.
Okay, thank you. I had asked for the vote and it was carried, so I'll take that as a comment, Councillor Cornish, and apologise that I didn't get to you before I put the vote. So that was passed. Moving on, item GM12, staffing. This is just an informational report. Anything to say about that, Chris?
Just to note that we had our record level of applications for our traineeships. We had 120 people.
Wow.
120 applied for the traineeships.
Yeah.
That's
And how does that compare with the past, Chris?
The last time we did, we had 35. Yeah.
That's amazing.
So
all right then. Well, I mean, it's a sign of the times, but it also means that we get to draw upon a broader pool of talent. So hopefully we'll get quality people.
Yeah, and a lot of our trainees now as well, I think even the ones that aren't working with us in full-time weed officer positions and being awesome with us, they've actually moved into the broader industry. So they're out there working for national parks and other councils, and we're the only council in the state that I think drives a bottom level training program for weed officers. And yeah, that's, I think, a real credit to this organisation that we're continuing to do that, particularly through these difficult times. We're the only ones that really support the trade-based level qualifications of weed officers, and it's showing the fruits, not only for HRCC, but also for Sydney more broadly.
Excellent. Any other commentary? So I'm seeking a mover and a seconder. I'm just going to pick people. Marcus Cornish moved. Samuel Uno seconded to receive and note the staff report. All of those in favour say aye. Well, raise your hand. All of those opposed, declare that carried. Thank you very much. Item GM13, the Weed Action Program Demand Audit. I'm going to add my own preface to this, and I'll seek to be brief. I've requested that this item be placed in the business paper. This has been the subject of some discussion between the General Manager and myself. as chair, and it follows on from something that's been previously reported, and I just wanted to provide this additional context. My view, and I'm quite confident that you'll agree with me, is that we as an organisation must at all times profess publicly and demonstrate that we are a fully open, accountable, and honest body that dots every I and crosses every T. And there are a number of accountability mechanisms, which even we've discussed this evening, that relate to our financial accountability and our process accountability and so forth. Local land services may be within their rights to seek an audit of HRCC because we are in receipt of funding that it's their gift to dispense to different organisations. But I agree with the General Manager that if we are to be audited, that those audits have to have clear ground rules. We have to know the standard against which we're being audited, and we have to be able to respond practically to the demands that will fall on us to supply certain information at certain times. Now, this became the subject of a meeting that we sought with the Minister for Agriculture, and Robin was kind enough to help organise a meeting at Parliament House, and we met with not the Minister, but the Minister's delegate, but very high up. And at the end of that meeting was a clear understanding that we were operationally unable to meet the request for an audit at this time because many of our staff were working from home, and that to make a full response, it just couldn't occur at this time. And also that we were making a very reasonable request for the ground rules or the benchmarks for that audit to be made available prior to the commencement of the audit. It's significant to tell you that the Minister's delegate agreed with those points and that there was going to be some correspondence back to LLS and their chosen auditor, KPMG, to let them know that the process was going to be delayed by at least 6 months, or at least until such time as the COVID restrictions would permit us to respond operationally, and also for them to provide the benchmarks. And neither of those things have happened. And that's why I've invited the General Manager to bring this back to us so that his response can have the informed consent and support of the board. Is there anything that you want to add to that, Chris?
No, I think you've summarised it well. And yeah, just on the full and open disclosure, that's absolutely what this organisation under my management has always been about. And we're currently in the process of being audited as well. Our financial audit which is a statutory audit. We do not have the right to not undertake it. In fact, we have to pay the external auditor $14,000 for the pleasure of us being audited. But in the process of developing and getting that audit going, there was extensive consultation between us and the auditor and an extremely detailed engagement contract, which stipulated exactly what we were to be audited on and the actual benchmarks that we had to achieve for each of those items. And that's quite simply an audit process. If you can't follow an audit process and just call it an audit, you're essentially undertaking an investigation, which is the role of ICAC. It's not the role of LLS. And they could refer any evidence they had if they wanted to ICAC, but they've provided us with no evidence. I don't believe there is any evidence because there's never been a question with any of our reporting or any of the governance requirements we've had. It's simply, as I said before, I think it was a handy way for them to flush funds at the end of the financial year. And the other council that got audited was in the decision-making process and part of the WAP steering committee and agreed at the time to voluntarily comply. So they knew they had one council ready to go and roll over. That's not the case with HRCC. We weren't invited in to the decision-making process or even consulted. This was just thrown at us. Then we got this agreement, and then the general manager of LLS is behaving like that meeting never took place. So we need to ramp up our communications around that to make sure that we are treated fairly. Simple as that.
Well, all right then. Now, I'd like to open this up for discussion, but if you'll indulge me, I'd like to call on Councillor Preston first, because she was present at that meeting, and I want to make sure that the discussion that we're about to have is fully informed, and that, Councillor Preston, do you agree with the complexion that's been placed on these events since you were present at our meeting with the Minister? You'll need to unmute.
Yes, I do. And I think it was a good opportunity for our organisation to be represented face to face there. We hadn't been able to do that before, Chris. And I think you'll agree that it actually opened up a conversation that wasn't even there before, and just getting them to understand the role of HRCC and the interaction and requirements, and also the size of the organisation compared with what expectations were with audits and things like that.
Yeah,
I think it was important that we were able to do that face to face, and I think they were very receptive.
All right then. Thank you, Robin. Okay. Any other discussion? I'm sure. I'm going to eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Councillor McEwen, by hair.
By hair. Thanks for that, Nathan. Look, I just had a question in relation to on page 36, where it talked about the meeting outcomes, and it says the Department of Primary Industries will arrange independent mediation between GS, LLS and HRCC. I was just a little bit confused by that.
Yeah, that was something that they asked if they organised, would we participate in? And we said, sure. Like, I really didn't see it as that kind of issue. But I think the representations that they got internally, they wanted to cast it as some kind of battle that they were fighting against HRCC or something. I'm not sure why that actually got brought up. I was not expecting that. Yeah. But that was actually came directly from Alexandra Hall, her name was. So I was actually thought that would, afterwards I thought about it and I thought that would actually be, a useful thing as well.
Because usually that's only, well, not only, but usually that's when you have, adversarial positions, I suppose. I just thought it was quite, I didn't realise that the relationship had broken down to such a degree that it necessitated formal mediation. Because it is a big step, and it is a formal process. So that, I must admit, when I read that, quite took me aback. So hence I asked the question. I've got a question around the recommendation, but I might leave it there at the moment, Mr. Chair, and then ask the question on the recommendation a bit later.
Indeed. Thank you. And of course, we don't have a motion before the chair, and I was trying to proceed in such a fashion as that we only debate things that relate to a motion. So is anybody prepared to move and second this so that we can proceed?
Move it.
Councillor Uno is prepared to move, and Councillor Cornish is prepared to second. Councillor Uno, you are next in the list.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just slightly confused. So initially on page 36, it said that GLS will delay the audit 6 months. That was an outcome. Again, on page 37, it says at the 3rd of August that they gave notice that the audit would be starting next week.
Yeah.
So could you explain that? Like,
Well, that's exactly that email with that demand is exactly the reason it's had to come back to the board. So I've obviously in that email told the general manager, I'm not sure if you're aware, but we have actually had this meeting at Parliament House on this date, and these were the outcomes. So she's now got that information, and she didn't respond back to me. And also we haven't had auditors knocking on the door this week. So I don't know, like that's the sort of way they operate. They don't really have a conversation. It's just this correspondence or an email, this is happening. And then it takes me by surprise. And then I've got to respond back equally forcefully to say, no, it's not. I'm the general manager of this organization. I have a resolution and I'm denying access to any auditors until this is resolved. So that's the response I gave to that email.
Chris, is there anything outstanding that they're requiring from HRCC?
No, there's nothing HRCC really needs to do. The workload is entirely on the Greater Sydney here. And yeah, otherwise I'd be more than happy to comply.
Right. Okay. Councillor Kotlash.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm a bit confused with this process because there's been a lot of talk about fairness of process, etc., etc. But it seems to me that there's a lot of accusations flying around around this item. It seems to me that if we were going to have a fair resolution of this, that Greater Sydney LLS was at least should have been present at this meeting. Now, it seems to me have I got that right, that somebody from LLS wasn't present at this meeting that you had with the Minister's advisor? Is that the case?
Yeah.
So this resolution that we've got is to write to the Minister stating the outcomes of that meeting and request clarification in writing. I'm assuming that we don't have that clarification, so I'm assuming that Greater Sydney LLS don't have that. So I am really not happy with this whole situation. I think this should have been dealt with in a very different way. I think we're just getting ourselves into a bit of a tizzy over this. I think that surely we can just have some sort of, I don't know, meeting. Maybe it has to be with the Minister's advisor, but that seems a little over the top. And to resolve this, it seems to me that this is a small audit. The other council, as far as I can gather, has done the audit and everything went all right. They managed to do it through COVID. So I think we should really try to resolve this. And if we claim to be as transparent as we can be, can we just get on with this? I can't see, or at least get on with some sort of negotiation about a way forward. At the moment, this seems to be quite adversarial, and it doesn't need to be. I'm not supporting this motion. I'll only support a motion that says that we actually get together with the local Greater Sydney Local Land Services and try to work this out.
Thank you, Councillor Kotlash. Other comment? Councillor McEwen.
My question relates to the recommendation, and maybe Amanda sort of has touched on it a bit, but I just didn't think it was very clear exactly what it was that we were seeking. So it's the report is received and noted, then number 2, that the chair write to the Minister at a marshal stating the outcomes of the meeting held on 4 June 2020 and requesting clarification in writing. Then with the correspondence to all the local members and Local Government New South Wales and LLS chair and so forth. So when we're saying and requesting clarification in writing, so what we're after is like an agreed set of outcomes for that meeting. Is that what we're after here, or I wasn't too sure what that, because it just says requesting clarification. I thought, well, clarification of what? What happened at the meeting, what was discussed at the meeting, or what the outcomes or the agreed actions, or was just unsure.
Yeah, the problem here is you know, I guess it's part of the problem with the structure. Like, this is the minister responsible for LLS. He is LLS. You know, under parliamentary rule, he is LLS.
I get that.
So when we say LLS wasn't there, he's there, or his delegates there. He could have.
I'm not questioning LLS being there or not being there. What I need is the wording of this recommendation is that we're requesting clarification in writing, and I don't know what.
Yeah, okay. So the clarification is that we were guaranteed a 6-month delay, and we were not given that. So we were given a delay, and we're also given a clarification that it wouldn't just be audit in name, it would actually be an audit as an audit is carried out, which is to a prescribed set of benchmarks. The audit carried out at Central Coast was not carried out like that. I do not believe that was an audit. That was also an investigation, but it was done voluntarily. So it was there was no issue there. If LLS wanted to approach me and talk about a voluntary investigation as well, they could have done that, but they didn't. They just turned it into a formal process immediately and engaged KPMG to do that immediately. I had no opportunity to consult or discuss anything with them. So when you're treated, and you've got to have a response. I mean, essentially what we're trying to do here, as I see it, is campaign against LLS, against the treatment of us as an LCA, and also bring to light some significant problems with the whole structure of the process, and particularly the double handling of the funding. So it's one of those things that can either be sort of looked at as a little thing, no worries, just do it, but it actually has huge ramifications for the whole, potentially for the structure of the whole WAP funding process.
Okay.
So yeah. So
getting back to the recommendation, which is really what I'm seeking clarification on. So where we have on page 36 items 1 to 7 that are listed there.
Yeah, that will go in the correspondence.
By all and sundry that they were the outcomes of the meeting.
Yes.
So we have had communication from the department that, you know, that is their understanding of the outcomes of the meeting and so forth. Is that right in assuming that?
Yeah. And whether that's probably been communicated to LLS, but LLS have chosen to ignore it, or have chosen to interpret it in a completely different light.
So we're just that's
wanting reinforcement in writing.
Yes.
Sorry?
That's why we need it put in writing. That's correct.
Okay, so that's really what we're seeking. So because the recommendation as it's listed there doesn't actually refer to that, you know, so the chair right to Adam Marshall, outcomes of the meeting, you know, items 1 to 7.
Items 1 to 7, okay.
Yeah, and list the items 1 to 7.
Yep.
And then request clarification from the minister in writing, you know, that this is in fact, well, I suppose we have to be careful that the department don't see us as trying to verbal them in some way. But, you know, if all you guys were at the meeting, you know exactly what was discussed, what was agreed to. I'm just worried that recommendation didn't capture.
Yeah, I understand.
What you're trying to achieve.
I've added that in. I will extend that in the minutes to say items of the meeting 1 to 7, and I will list those items which we considered were outcomes of the meetings,
Yep.
and we're seeking clarification from the minister in writing that yes, they were the outcomes. That should then
Yeah.
direct LLS to
I'm
do
seeking
those
concurrence from the minister.
And seeking concurrence from the minister. Yeah.
yes.
I'm happy with that wording. That's fine. Yep.
All right then, and I'm equally happy with that. Is there further discussion? There being no further discussion, the recommendation has been moved by Councillor Uno and seconded by Councillor Cornish. All of those in favour, raise your hand. All of those opposed. I declare it carried and presume that Councillor Kotlash would prefer to see her dissent noted in the minutes.
It will be
That's
noted in
correct.
the minutes.
Okay then. All right then, thank you. Operational reports. Hurrah, at last. Natalie, Philip, you've been so terribly, terribly patient.
I know.
Didn't we
Guys.
say that we were going to try and invert things at some point so that these poor suffering souls didn't have to put
Yeah,
up?
I've got some suggestions at the end of their reports about how to alleviate their burdens.
All right then, OC1, Natalie or Philip,
Yeah.
take it away.
So we've had a very unusual winter this year. It's been very warm. We've only really had one major frost. So in that regards, a lot of the weeds haven't gone dormant this year and have persisted throughout the winter. I've even noticed some flowering plants are starting to flower in response to spring conditions. So we may even have an early spring. All the staff have been adhering to our COVID policy, working at safe distances out in the field. We had a bit of catching up to do on some of the Crown land stuff in June. So that kind of impacted a little bit, but we got all the hours complete for that, and that report's been sent off. So yeah, we're thinking about starting our aquatic season early, just because of the conditions we're currently experiencing. I'm starting to do a few more tables and stuff, which will probably help the different LGAs in understanding where I've been working, and expanding these tables in the future with more specific locations and that kind of stuff. So you'll be able to see how we've been moving around each LGA. And our harvesters currently still being fixed up in Newcastle. That's been going on pretty well. I don't have a date when it'll be ready, just because of COVID and stuff. They've had some delays with getting parts, but it's still on track. We're still in correspondence with those guys. And then with the response also with the aquatic season starting early, we're doing some other repairs on our other machine as well at the moment and get that up and running. Are there any questions or anything you want to know?
Sorry, I am here. I'm adjudicating. Councillor Kotlash.
Thank you. Thanks, Natalie. Great, great work. I think we spoke a bit about this last time when we had our terrestrial weeds. We have our graphs and our targets. With some of these targets, we're obviously not going to hit them. Like, obviously, for this financial year.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that? Do you roll that over? I mean, are we just going to, I haven't had a look at the operational plan, but presumably those targets, when we did the operational plan, we didn't know then that we wouldn't hit these targets. So do we now have just extra work to do? Is that how it works?
Sort of. I mean, that one particular target, I was never, and we would never meet that 98 hectare target. I've said this previously, that there's no such thing as 98 hectares of African olive in my 4 LGAs on roadsides and parks. If it is there, it's on private properties, which we don't do under the WAP anyway. So I have tried.
Over, you just write that off as a not a good target.
Yeah, yeah. I have, like, I did put African olives in the next WAP, but it kind of got taken off it because they regarded it as more just a smaller section of our LGA and didn't think it was appropriate. So they kind of took it off themselves and just focused on something like bone seed.
Right.
But I have been sort of trying to make it up as well, and actively go for more stuff like that.
So next year we can look for seeing targets that might say 10.
They're more achievable and they're more in the ballpark of where we should be.
Excellent. Wonderful.
So yes, the graphs will start looking better for sure.
Yeah. Looks like it's just an impossible achievement.
I wanted to throw in that I've particularly appreciated the posts that you're making to the HRCC Facebook page. When they have a local focus, I share them to my local community, and I get some good feedback on the basis of that. And I'm wondering, or I'm asking whether somebody actually monitors the feedback by way of comments that come from those posts, because often they are from residents that want to point you in a particular direction or ask whether a particular species or particular road verge is being treated. So that feedback is great.
Yeah, we're definitely jumping on that at the moment. One of my weed officers, Christina, she's responsible for taking the photos out in the field and creating the post, and that's kind of her little role that she does weekly at the moment. So we just sort of read over what she's going to post before she posts it. And then, we noticed that we got a few comments this time, usually with Mother of Millions, because it's something that people easily spot this time of year. So it's good that we can sort of establish that line of communication via Facebook and use that, not only as residents giving us tip-offs of where they've spotted it in their area that we could do work for them, but also have that open communication about control and getting them interested. Oh, I've got this on my property. What can I use? What are you guys using?
Exactly. So that post about Mother of Millions in Oakville prompted me to say, we have a terrible problem with it at the east end of Garfield Road behind Arndell College. And they were saying, look, there seems to be a cluster here. Can you please come and do this? And I'm not suggesting you can jump on every such request. But certainly if it's residents making a good faith effort to point you in the right direction, I'd be heartened if you were doing that.
Yeah, and even when the guys are out in the field, especially Oakville, so we started that last year, and so this is its second treatment in that area as well. And I've had like really good feedback with, oh yeah, what are you using? Like while the guys are out there, and then, a week later, the resident's gone out, bought the chemical and is doing their property on their side of the fence, and we're doing the roadside. So we're getting that really good communication between the landowners and the staff, that we're both playing our part and we're both actively kind of knock the weeds out.
Excellent. Is that your report, or are we happy to question?
I guess the other thing was also with the social media, Penrith Council this week also did a weed notification on their Facebook, and we've also got some really good tips and feedback off that this week as well. So people have identified, African olive, oh, that's behind my fence, and that allows them to contact me via email and have that communication as well. So it's definitely something that we've noticed in the last couple of weeks, and we'll keep at it and yeah, improve our social media interface and our presence in the community.
Excellent. I just want to be clear, does that conclude your report? Because I'm sure there are other questions.
Yeah.
Thank you, Natalie. Were there any other questions or comments? Julie?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Can I just ask how you determine how many hours you do in an LGA? I'm only asking because Blacktown has got only 21 hours.
I know.
And I noticed how high everybody else is.
Yeah.
I'm feeling a bit like a poor cousin at the moment.
I'm making it up. I'm making it up in July and August for sure. Yeah, June I was a bit, so this is only reporting for 1 month as well. This is just June. So June was a really tough time getting the Crown reserves done as well and getting those hours up. So that wasn't in Blacktown, unfortunately. But so that job we did in Blacktown was at the request from a council staff member, and we did it out of favour.
No favours. So maybe, I mean, because it's one of your targets, you know, and as you said, you're doing, say, crowned land, that maybe in one of your spiel you could put that due to the, you know, targets on crown land during this month, high concentration on those sites was required. So the people, when I read the report, I understand why our numbers are down, because you know the government's taken all of our land, so we don't have anything left. But what is Truxa?
So it's our water tractor. So it's a machine that floats on the water, and it has a little scoop bucket, and it can scoop up aquatic weeds. So out in Blacktown, we were scooping out algae and azolla that was in one of their lakes at the ponds.
Oh, at the ponds where the we call them the swans are.
It's called Ironbark Lake.
Yeah, that's right. It's beautiful. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Councillor Uno.
Also, Alison, you did such a great job in Blacktown previously. They don't have the weeds that they used to have.
He was say that the weeds aren't in Blacktown anymore, sort of thing. He's referring to the development, maybe.
Thank you, Councillor Cornish. It was rather difficult to hear you there. Councillor Uno?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So obviously, all of the targets starting from 1 July will be different. So, I mean, was it you and your team that basically have set the targets for FY21?
So I've set them based on what we achieved this year and sort of aim for that or a little bit more. And then if we achieve that, well, then I'll put the targets up the next year, and that's how we're going to figure that out.
So you're comfortable with the targets that have been set for FY21?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, great.
Okay, thank you. Other comments? The only other thing that I'll add is that I was particularly pleased to see a reference to you doing treatment for privet and spider plant at Holland Reserve. And if that's the Holland Reserve at Glenhaven, that was actually named after my great-grandfather. Holland Reserve and Holland Road are the family name on my mother's side. So it's good to see the family reserve being looked after in Glenhaven.
I'll make sure I mention that to the staff.
Yes.
There's a little side story, a little connection, a little bit more love in TLC.
Very much so. Thank you very much. If there's no further questions, we'll thank Natalie very much for her time and very much for her patience. So have another marshmallow. OC2 biosecurity, is that Philip?
That is.
Thank you for your patience. Go for it.
Sorry to interrupt you, Phil. Chair, did we get a mover and seconder? I might have missed it for OC1.
I do apologise. No, we have to adopt these. So I'm looking for a mover and a seconder. I'm going to pick on Councillor Preston and Councillor Kotlash. as the mover and seconder to receive the OC1 report and OC2. Yes. Actually, let's get OC2 out of the way as well. And I'll choose Councillor Uno and Councillor McEwen to move and second the receipt of OC2, which we are about to receive and for which we are grateful. Go, Philip.
Okay, same as Natalie, this pretty much only covers the 1 month. So my report is quite light this time. No complaints there in terms of me. Yeah, our private property inspections have achieved beyond what I was expecting. That's the majority of my working towards the WAP. Just doing those private property inspections, they're going fantastically. We're getting really good targets from, and we're figuring out how to better target the actual inspections themselves. So I expect that just to be improved as we go forward into our new operational plan. Moving on to our nurseries and high-risk inspection sites. They were going well. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll meet that. We won't meet the target exactly then, but we will definitely meet in the new operational plan. And same with the internet searches that went above well. We also managed to get a really good relationship and still have a very good relationship with Nigena, which is the nursery and garden industry body. And they actually invited us to do an article in their next release, which I'll include in the next paper. So that's really good. The nurseries out there are actually quite liking us, and I've had 2 phone calls so far with nurseries that actually reported suspicious weeds and sales from within and around their areas. So it's really good to get another set of eyes on the grounds, especially professional eyes from horticulturalists out there looking for stuff. Moving on to the re-inspections, they were slowly picking up and they will continue to pick up going forward. And the rest of the stuff's been going well. Weed management plans are going to start picking up again. Now that COVID has settled down, I stopped doing as many weed management plans because it is a very face-to-face scenario with most of the landholders. So I just got my staff and myself to back off of them for a bit. So that's why you could see a bit of a drag there. The surveillance of the high-risk pathways, again, overreached the target, which was fantastic. I was quite happy with my staff there, and with a bit more tweaking of that, with our technology, we're getting a better record of the weeds out there on those high-risk pathways. So with my GIS maps, I'm starting to see them being populated very well with some good data. I'm quite happy with my staff. The non-regulatory sites, unfortunately, COVID really hit that. Not many more reports came in from the public. Not many people wanted anyone moving around their property voluntarily, because that's what's classed as a non-regulatory. It has to be a reactionary visit. We did have a small pickup, which I attributed to everyone being at home and complaining about their neighbours' weeds or the bacteria they didn't like. But yeah, it seemed to have petered off, and we were unable to reach the target that was set there. So that's my very brief report. Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions? Councillor Kotler.
Thank you, and thank you, Philip. That's great. With the nurseries, pet shops, and aquaria, I suppose. How many do we have in the area, in the local control area? How do you get to wanting to have an annual target of 287?
That's a double up, so we inspect them twice.
Right.
I apologise. I should have made that a bit more. It definitely will be made clear in the next report, but that is a double up. So all inspections take place and this will be included in the angina article, so that the industry is aware of it, especially the nursery industry. They will be being done in spring and autumn twice a year.
Yeah.
So, and then obviously other reactionary visits. If anyone's suspected of having something coming out of the nursery. I had one last week like that, so the number may be high, but it is definitely 2 a year. In terms of just the nurseries and the gardens, off the top of my head, I would say across our area, I think we're sitting around 50 to 60, but those targets also take into, with the new WAP and our operational plan, also take into other high-risk sites such as backyard sales, etc. They get grouped under the same targets. So.
Yeah.
And it's not just that, it's turf farms, a whole range of industry gets under that.
I just wanted to ask another question if I can. With the non-regulatory high-risk sites, and I know you just explained that it's reactionary. Well, it's kind of, how would you, what were you, you're sort of setting yourself up to fail with 283 annual targets. I mean, why do you have a target for that? Because you.
So I just want to make this clear to the board. I inherited all these targets. So when I moved into the role, these are the targets that were given to me. I cannot make comment or explain why they were set there before my time here.
That's all you have to say. I understand. I just thought, geez, you wouldn't want many, would you? You wouldn't want 283 anyway.
I will also state that the definition of non-regulatory has changed between the two WAPs. And that has influenced my operational plan as well. So when you see the next report, you will see, and well, our operational report, you see that it has decreased, but there's a lot more leeway, a lot more wiggle room in regards to that definition now.
Right. Excellent. Thanks. Terrific. Good stuff. Thank you.
Tremendous. Thank you very much for your report. Any other questions? Councillor McEwen.
Yep.
Just very quickly, thanks for your report, Philip. So when will you get the opportunity to be able to review those targets and get something realistic so that you're not sort of constantly beating your head against it, so to speak, and, taking into consideration that there's now new labels or tags for different things, just so it makes it, you go out there day to day and you think, God, I'll never ever get to that one, how on earth am I going to, meet that KPI or whatever. So when does that happen for you?
That's already been done in the new WAP and the new operational plan. So that was done about 2 months ago. We finalised all those figures for the new operational plan, and as with Nat. So what's going forward is what both coordinators have decided we know we can meet and what's reasonable for our staff and ourselves to meet.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Cornish, I think you were seeking comment.
Just on the aquarium part, because I have several fish tanks and ponds, and I buy weed. Is duckweed on the naughty list?
No, it is not.
It's not good, okay, because it seems to be infesting on everything I buy. And another thing, just out of interest, that we've discovered in Penrith, is when we put down fake turf, weeds grow in it. So it seems to be a problem. We've still got to spray the fake turf. So they're not plastic weeds, they're real weeds. So I don't think there's many ways of getting around it. But again, the mother of millions, it seems to be a constant thing I'm hearing. But no, well done, mate. And I fully understand you've got to work out what your new targets are going to be. And when they're done, we'll be looking forward to seeing them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? I just wanted to add one question of my own. When you say that you do internet searches, I presume that covers multiple platforms in the sense that, there might be Gumtree, but there's also Facebook Marketplace. There might be private Facebook groups that people set up to trade stuff like this. So are you casting a wide net on the internet to find people?
So those specific searches, for reasons I do not know, were removed from our WAP funding. And I also have always had issues, privacy-related issues and risks towards the council that myself and Chris have now discussed in terms of using those platforms, other accounts to be able to get usable information on those platforms. So going forward, I do not intend to actively pursue that. If I have the 5 minutes in the office, I will look on Gumtree and my own private Facebook Marketplace, but it's very hard to use that information in terms of the regulatory and via the legislation. I was actually having a discussion with DPI representatives today in terms of entrapment in Australia and going forward for that. So coming from state, there hasn't really been a decision on that yet, or direct guidance given to the LCAs in the area.
You're dispelling my romantic delusions that you lay in wait and that you set up a sting operation and then your operatives swing in and, catch the person at the point that they're taking the Salvinia out of their pocket in the back alley.
If I thought if I thought that we had the support, the legal support of state, and it wasn't such a risk to council, I actually agree with you and I would prefer that. My interpretation of the Biosecurity Act is that we should have that support and we should have that legislative power. But as the ongoing issue with the Biosecurity Act is that it has not been tested in court yet. So yeah, until it gets tested, we can't really know what we can and can't do, unfortunately. But that is what I would envision myself as a coordinator and working in this space for now 6 years should be happening.
Well, if you think that we've got carry side up, then the board will consider that request.
Thank you.
Okay, so any other questions? There being no other questions, thank you, Philip, very much for your patience. Natalie, very much for your patience. Chris, should we let them go now? Because there is an item later in our business paper that's a confidential matter. So
Yeah.
should we say goodnight to them now, or?
I'd probably I'll take this point to raise a option going forward for our operational reporting. And that is the statutory requirements is that they only have to report 4 times a year, and our organisation is making them do it 6 times every council meeting. So by way of alleviating some of their administrative burden, I was going to suggest to the board that we only have them produce their operational reports 4 times a year. But we thought that we don't want to sort of, like, it's not, if they if the board still wants an like, I understand as well that the operational aspect of the meeting is probably the most interesting as well. So I thought perhaps still involving Natalie and Phil in the meeting, but in a less formal capacity, such as in possibly a more educative role for those 2 meetings a year in which they're not producing an operational report. I just wanted to get the feelings of the board on that.
I have no particular objection. Does anybody else have thoughts? Councillor Kotlash?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Ages and ages ago, a couple of years ago, we discussed actually reducing the number of meetings we have. I can't remember what happened about that. We all were in furious agreement.
We decided to do that.
You've had it?
We made a decision that that wouldn't happen because, and the
Oh,
reason
did we?
that
Oh, I thought we said it was a great idea. I can't remember, but
it wasn't a good idea because of the dates and the statutory framework of everything, the way it all needs to work. If we have it spaced out, yeah, we'll miss important meetings or maybe timeframes such as adopting the budget or putting the operational plan on exhibition and then adopting it in timeliness.
So, yeah, that's
so,
okay.
So
Forget I said anything. I thought I was going to get us out of the big hole and say,
I know. That would be unreal. That would be unreal. Because I could tell you that.
Well, I've said it. Now
so this is a smaller way of achieving that outcome, similar outcome, and still meeting our regulations and legislative operational reporting requirements.
All right then. So is there broad consensus from the councillors? We've lost Councillor Griffiths, unfortunately, but I'm surprised that she was able to join us for as long as she did.
Yeah, she sends her apologies. Sorry, Nathan, that her phone, she had to go.
No, that's okay. I mean, she's gone above and beyond considering her circumstance.
Yeah.
My only regret is that we've lost her before we had the opportunity to pass on our very best wishes.
Yeah.
And hope for a return to health, a speedy return to health.
Yeah.
Remarkably diligent of her to still feel the obligation to dial in.
Amazing, yeah.
Given where she is tonight, she could have taken the night off. Is there any objection to lowering the burden of reporting? Councillor Runo, your comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I mean, out of the whole part of the meeting, I actually find the stuff that Natalie and Philip produced to be of the most interest and most relevant. It's the purpose of why we're both on this. So I would prefer that it stays the same and that we move the operational bits to the start of the meeting before getting into the other items.
Councillor, I think the point that the general manager was making wasn't merely that we were calling them into these meetings and making them watch us talk for 3 hours before they got to their report, but it's the frequency of the reporting through the year that's the primary issue. So, I mean, I think it would be good to move their reports to the beginning of the meeting anyway, so we can dispense with that and then let them go and have their dinner. So you would object to reducing the frequency at all?
I really enjoy seeing all of the progress against each of the different areas.
Okay. I'll take other views. Does anybody else have a strong opinion?
I can see where it's coming from, and I agree. And I do think it was at the beginning of the meeting and done first, and then they could go. But I do think with the turnover of councillors in county council, me being the longest one on here, and this is like what, 2 terms. You know, it's important the councillors are kept in contact with what's happening, because whereas people like Councillor Kotlash understands a lot about the biosecurity things, and a couple of others do as well. People such as Councillor Uno, who's just come on, and others, and they will keep turning over. Don't forget, we've got the election next year, so we'll have new faces again. I think it's very important, and one thing I do think we should be going back to when we can have face-to-faces is the show and tell. I think that's very good when you bring in the weeds and explain what they are and all the bits about them. I think that's a fantastic thing, because people say to us, or say to me, what is a county council? What do they do? And all this, and we're supposed to know as much as you guys in the public's eyes, and so we certainly don't. You guys know what it's about when we're just a governance situation. So yeah, I can see where that's of a bonus, and I'm not saying we should stick strictly to it. If there's something, cut it down a little bit. But I think at the moment, I'm sure Councillor, would like to see more, and it might even pay that if he could come in one day and just see Chris and just have a bit of an explanation on quite a bit. Private thing would be a good thing as well. So maybe that's something that could be thought of.
Thank you, Councillor. So just to be clear, the general manager has sought direction from the board as to whether we could decrease that frequency of the operational reports. So unless somebody's prepared to move something specific that way or
question,
I'll do so. Councillor McEwen.
I just doing the numbers in my head, as you do. The general manager was proposing 4 times a year. Is that correct? So yeah. Given that we meet bi-monthly, 4 times a year would be every 3 months if we were to sort of divide it up. So I'm just wondering, how is that going to work? So would it be like February and then June and then August and then December, or something along those lines? Or
yeah, it'd be
how would that work?
It'd be exactly the same as the financial reporting time frame. So we got the 4th quarter report tonight. You'd get the 4th quarter operational report. And as you notice with their report tonight, they were only reporting on June. So they really didn't have a lot to report on. And it's not so much their attendance at the meeting. There's no problem with that. They're more than happy to sit and listen to us. I've got that on good advice for both of them. It's more about the time I see them investing inside the office, preparing those reports for you guys, and just alleviating them of that burden twice a year, but replacing it with a more informal, educative, say, presentation on, Phil may give a presentation on how we undertake our mapping and reporting of weeds. Natalie may give a presentation on particular weed species. So kind of actually just trying to bring a little bit more diversity and flavour into these meetings to try and give the board a bigger picture of things. And even if you wanted to maintain the continuation, I could easily, if there wasn't an operational report to update, if we hadn't got to the next quarter or beyond it, I was thinking of just just putting in the latest operational report, you know, as an item as well. So yeah, but that's all it is. I'm just trying to think improving things both from my staff perspective, but also from the board's perspective of gaining a better overall picture of HRCC and what we do.
See, in my opinion, now you're cooking, in the sense that to simply reduce the reporting frequency, I was ambivalent about that. But if you're filling the gaps with things that educate us, as an educator, I'm all in favour. So do you need a motion from the board to do this, or can you?
I don't believe I do, because I'm not going outside of the regulations.
Okay, so still, so it's still good to have a consensus within the room.
Exactly. I wouldn't. If you guys want to keep it as it is, we'll keep it as it is. And
can I seek a consensus? Does anybody have any show-stopping objection to doing it that way, but then replacing the reporting that would have otherwise come to us with some other educational? So, Councillor Uno is a no.
Yeah, I'm with Councillor Uno. I actually like the formula that we have. I like the regular meetings. I like the data in front of me as well. And I like the interaction we have with the staff and the board members. I think, why are we changing this? What's the matter?
Councillor Preston is a no.
Yeah, I'll keep it. I'm against it too.
Councillor Cornish is against. Councillor Kotlash, your opinion? We can't hear you.
You're asking me for my opinion. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
A yes or no?
My opinion. Okay, now, sorry, being silly. I'm kind of, I could be swayed to keep it the same. It's working for me. I mean, yeah, it's working for me. I mean, I don't really want to have a presentation on, for a bit or something, but that's just me. Probably.
All right then, Councillor McKeon.
And I could be forgiven for that, I guess. So maybe just stick to it at the moment.
We're board members, aren't we? This is our role is as board members.
Yeah, we don't really have to know.
Yeah.
No problem. That's fine.
Nathan,
Councillor McEwen.
I can see the benefits in terms of the reporting. I personally have always got a lot out of the operational report. I'm like the others. I really do look forward to them as well, and I do read them thoroughly when we do get them. And I love the interaction that we are able to have with the staff, and when we have questions. I was going to propose as, a possibility, maybe we just trial it for a year, but look, I'm happy to go with the majority that, because I do get a lot out of them myself. So I'd probably like to see them continue. Maybe we can drop the December report or something like that if it's not, there's not a lot on the agenda and it's not too urgent, given that that's usually the meeting we try and sort of pare back a little bit. Might be different this year, but that might be a way to go.
All right then. Well, as for myself, I was prepared to endorse a compromise, but I have to acknowledge the sentiment in the room. A clear majority of my colleagues have said that they prefer the status quo. So I think you should take that as the advice of the board.
I will. No problem. Sorry, guys.
No. I mean, no objection to you raising it.
I'm apologising to my staff, but but on the alternative, I'm sure they're extremely ecstatic about all the positive feedback they just got on their reports. So they'll do them with gusto and enthusiasm.
Absolutely. We do enjoy those reports.
So that's okay.
And that effort that you put into the collation and presentation of that data is valuable and is great for us.
But that should be moved to the front of the agenda, Mr. Chair.
I think we should also take that on advisement. That's also true. All right then. So we had actually moved and endorsed the second operational report. So that's it for the operational reports. There's the correspondence report, there's general business, and then there's a confidential item. Should we let the others go, Chris?
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Philip. Thank you very much, Natalie.
Thank you. Thanks to both of you.
Right then. A couple of just procedural things to gallop through what's left. There's the council correspondence report. There are 4 items of correspondence. None of them should be particularly surprising in the sense that they've all been discussed in some form or another. I'll seek a mover and a seconder to accept the correspondence report. I can only see the face of Councillor Uno and Councillor McEwen, so I'll take that as mover and seconder.
Can I just, excuse me, Mr. Chair?
Now go for it.
Should we have the letter that was sent from LLS saying that the audit was going ahead? Because actually, when I asked that, and by the way, thanks, Chris, for that, for the correspondence, but actually 2 of them were doubled up, so I think I've actually not got the whole set. But anyway, I was too late to the table to do anything about that, but that's okay. So should we have that? I mean, because that's fairly official correspondence, isn't it?
Yeah, that was an email. Okay, is that the most recent email from saying?
I don't know.
Yeah, so the email exchange between myself and the general manager of Greater Sydney, is that what you'd like to see?
I just wondered because I mean, I'm going on my personal experience here, and I always put in sort of substantial emails if they're about something like an audit or they're about, you know, a process. I don't always receive letters, you know.
Yeah, I know
emails
what you mean.
Almost,
yeah.
You know, considered to be.
I can send them to you if you like.
Oh no, I don't want to see them, but I just wondered whether we should have that in the correspondence list.
Yeah, you're probably right. I probably should have included that.
Just so we have that record, you know.
No, you're right. I should have. Yeah. That's. Yeah, I should have. That it was significant
I'll vote for it.
to warrant going in that report. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So those in favour of receiving the correspondence report, raise your hand. Those opposed, I'll declare that carried. Thank you very much. Now, just a point of procedure, Chris. So do we deal with general business and questions without notice before the confidential item or after?
It's up to you.
Look, let me just defer, if it's okay with you, let's just defer general business and other free-form questions, because I want to deal with the performance action plan. And now that we're in confidential, if this is a confidential matter, strictly speaking, you should cease the recording.
Yeah, I will. That's a good point.
It helps.
All right then. Okay.
Right.
So,
we do this properly.
Are you sure about the Noxious Weed Act?
I was just going to make the observation that Councillor McEwen is floating in space above the Nepean River looking downstream, and I'm floating in space above the Hawkesbury River looking upstream from Freeman's Reach. So we
that didn't need recording.
We're in
HRCC right there.
It's kismet. We're
beautiful,
floating above the river. Okay then.
Yeah.
Which of course is the Hawkesbury River, not the Nepean River. General business and questions without notice.
I have something.
Yes.
Should we have a minute clerk at our meetings?
We do. It's Chris.
Yeah, I know, but the last meeting, Chris said he had to do the minutes and organising, you know, like doing everything. And I just wondered whether we. Anyway, I just thought of it the other day.
We're paying Chris the big bucks because he can multitask.
Also, it's being recorded. Now he gets to cheat.
Oh well, that's okay. Yeah, it was just an idea I wanted to put in your heads, but I've got another better idea.
Yes.
could we have a policy register on the website? Because when I had my little brain snap about, God, I've read this, you know, I've read this thing about disclosure coordinators before. I had to go through all of the business papers, and it was just, and I was just flipping through things thinking, and I was getting really stubborn about it. And I'm thinking, why don't bother? And then I'm thinking, no, I can remember it. So just having just all our policies on the website, actually, I think that's a requirement for our, under our legislation, actually. I don't know what.
We have most the statutory policies up there, but we don't have it. And it's, well, we have the, you know, the code of conduct and that sort of stuff.
Is there any reason why we couldn't have every policy we have? Like,
no, it's just like, yeah, I'm the jack of all trades. I'm the webmaster as well for the website. So
yeah, but you could just put a document in, couldn't you? Like a couple of documents.
Yeah, I know, but it's yeah, I think I can do that. Yeah,
I could make a suggestion here, but it's a technical one. I mean, specifically uploading and maintaining links to policy documents that may then also be subject to further revision, that can become messy. And as a webmaster for several sites, I know how messy it can be. But there are simpler solutions. So, for example, we already use Dropbox. So we could have a specific public-facing, read-only Dropbox folder that can contain a series of PDFs, and the link on the website is simply to that public-facing Dropbox, which...
There are a number of ways of doing it, and I don't care which way we do it.
That's an excellent idea.
All you would do is kitchen sink documents, and they index themselves.
And we've already got exactly that. Our policy register sits on a cloud-based server. So, and that's, I go to it all the time, Amanda. I'm always using it. I would be dead if I didn't have my policy register to check up where everything is and is that ready and that how's that linked to here. So I can take Nathan's advice. We can set up an outward facing read-only link to that, and we can put that link on the website. So anyone wanting to check up on any of our policies can do that. And I know other county councils have their policy, have more policies up than we do. So that's okay, sure.
And you don't have to do the webmaster trudge every time something changes. You just put it into the Dropbox.
Yeah, because we've got a system of updating that register, and then that, yeah, exactly. That's good.
I think actually in that policy that we were talking about before, the public interest disclosure, it actually says in the policy that it has to be on the website. So we actually have to say that this is actually what we do.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
No, I didn't realise that it was mandatory.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, then moving things along. Any other items of general business? Questions?
Yes, I have one. Our fellow councillor in hospital, can Hawkesbury County Council send us some flowers?
Sure.
I think that would be a lovely gesture. I mean, I'm not sure how long she's in for, or whether you send this to her phone, or so. Just work out her status and whether she's in there for a stay or whether she'll be home tomorrow, and get the flowers to whichever the appropriate. But I think she really did go above and beyond tonight.
I think she may have been supporting her partner in hospital. I don't know that it was actually Julie who was in hospital. I think she was at the hospital supporting her partner, who I believe was in hospital. Okay. Yeah.
Still
I don't know. She looked like she changed her outfit and put her jammies on. Like she had something, you know. She changed.
Yeah. She looked like she was in hospital to me.
Yeah, and I thought she had a cannula in her arm.
Very, very upmarket hospital if they let the partners stay. What can I say?
Yeah.
No, I was just going to ask, because I came in at about 6:02 and I didn't know whether she'd said she's a COVID patient or what it was, and I was worried she was there, you know. So is she? We don't know what was going on, do we?
Make some discreet inquiries, Chris.
That's all right. You don't need to ask at all.
She did message me to say, because I said, "Are you in hospital?" And she said it was her partner who was there. So, and then she asked me to give Nathan apologies because she said they've asked me to leave. So can you tell, can you just let, so obviously visiting time was over. She was on the phone with us, but
And maybe flowers, would they not be quite appropriate if it's not Julie? But
Yeah.
no.
Got to save your budget. Yeah.
We give her 1,000 good points for doing what she did, though.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
I mean,
Absolutely, and deserves our thanks. Any other general business questions without notice? Right, so the last thing that I want to mention is our meeting in October is different in the sense that normally we would have an in-person meeting to facilitate the election of the chair and the deputy chair. That's the kind of thing that ought to occur in person, but I cannot predict whether government health regulations will permit us to do so, and what happens in the circumstance that we cannot have a face-to-face meeting where councillors may have chosen to conduct that ballot as a secret ballot. I mean, it's up to the will of the chamber at that point. So Chris, what we need you to do moving forward is just get some advice about where we stand for our October meeting and whether we have the ability to hold an in-person meeting because of the particular needs of that meeting, or whether we can do it online. And if we can't do it online, what happens?
Yep. Good
Well,
question.
Chris, I just got a question on that too, because from what I understand, don't like mayors stay for their extra year now, or they're not going to have an election of a mayor for 1 year, are they?
Yep.
They are, because
Yes,
my first advice was it wasn't going to happen. Now it is.
It is definitely, well, if you have to go through the process.
I think we do have to go through the
Right.
I agree, and I'll be discussing with each of the councillors in the coming several months. But I just wanted to work out what we were going to do in terms of the format of the meeting, or our ability to hold the meeting. And the general manager will advise us at the earliest opportunity about the government health regulations and about what effect that has on our ability to meet.
And the other question, of course, is we're here for a 4-year term. The council.
No, it's everything is extended for the 12 months, and then the next term of council after the 2021 election will be a 3-year term.
Correct.
And then we will.
Yeah.
There's a question I was like to Karen and myself stay on Holt County Council, do we have to be re-elected for 1 year? Because we were elected for term.
I'm sorry, Marcus. I didn't.
We were elected.
Sorry, I can't
We
hear.
were elected for. Can you hear me now?
No, it's a complete garble. We can't make out anything.
He's saying that normally you're elected for a particular term of 4 years. So this is going beyond that. So there would possibly have to be elections of all the councillors on this board because the 4-year term expires in September. Is that what you're trying to say?
Right, I see. So that's okay then. Now I understand. So that's an additional and a separate question, and that is that the general extension of 1 year that's been given to all of the municipal councils, does that require a turnover of the board of delegates to representative bodies like the county council? Now, I suspect that the answer is no, but I haven't seen that chapter and verse. That is also something that the general manager will investigate on our behalf.
You can seek that from the local government minister, if you like, or
I mean, I would be
the Office of Local Government on that one.
I would be astonished if they required a turnover for only a 12-month period. I suspect this will also extend in the same fashion. But clarification on that point will be good. If there's no other general business, I'll thank you all. No, Councillor Kotlash. Yes, several. Okay, Councillor Kotlash first. But you're on mute.
I was waving goodbye.
Oh, waving goodbye. And Councillor waving goodbye.
You could ask my opinion on something else. But...
No, please. Thank you very much all for your patience. It's trying. I find these meetings emotionally draining.
Yeah.
Doing it on Zoom, it makes my eyes go out on stage.
I'm going to go have a whiskey now.
No,
Have some dinner.
Good night, everyone. Bye.
I'll join you.
Bye,
So
everybody. Thank you, Miss. Thank you.
Good
Mayor.
night,
good
everyone.
night.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, bye-bye.